Welcome back to the channel. This is Trinity Storm and you are watching 6th part of What If Naruto Gave Up After Hinata's Death. If you enjoy this video, please like, share and subscribe to the channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
As he faced his opponent, the brown-haired adolescent gulped loudly. Squaring off against each other, they made the combat sign and assumed the Academy Taijutsu stance. One of them had assumed their taijutsu stance. His opponent, the boy in front of him, simply stood there with his hands in his pockets, a slight smirk on his face. The adolescent with brown hair swallowed nervously, thinking to himself that it had been a terrible idea to start bullying Hinata Hyuga again. When he looked at the man in front of him, he knew he had no chance of beating him. He was correct. Iruka exclaimed the traditional, Hajime. Yes, Hajime replied. Iruka shook his head and sighed. Just leave already. As the battle began, there was a small cloud of dust. Despite his best efforts, Hajime had yet to force his opponent's hands out of his pockets, which were located just below the blonde's waist-tie jacket. Hajime, frustrated, struck out with a wild left-left-right combo. As before, the uncoordinated movements were easily avoided. At the sight of it, Iruka shook his head. Too many of his students did not take their training seriously, which was evident in the attacking students' sloppy moves. Iruka, on the other hand, was taken aback by the second student's noticeable improvement. Naruto sighed, unconcerned about the fight he was currently involved in. Today was poker day, and Shinigami was confident that he would win at least a little more money than he had started with. Flashback. Come on, kid, you don't realize how fortunate you are. Shinigami asked, looking at Naruto incredulously. Arlia, who was in town at the time, simply laughed at him. Naruto stared at him as he prepared for another day at the academy. Lucky? Me? Well, let me see. Naruto collapsed onto his bed and began to lament his numerous problems. It was an extensive list. On my birthday, the village was attacked by a vicious, mangy demon fox bent on annihilating my home. I take offense at that mangy comment, Kyuubi said softly. His attitude had improved significantly since they had gone back in time. Apparently, not being trapped in a cage with the floor covered in excessively stagnant water for years at a time could do wonders for your emotional state. Shinigami, on the other hand, claimed that the kitsune had developed an unhealthy obsession with first-person shooters. Sorry, Q. No offense meant. Where was I? Oh yes, said Nine-Tailed Demon Fox kills many people in this village. In order to stop it. The fox chimed in. Naruto continued without pausing for a breath. To prevent him from destroying the entire village, my father decides to seal him within a baby's gut. Unfortunately, my mother was also required to assist with the sealing, resulting in both of their deaths. And the baby chosen for this was me. Naruto paused to take a breath. I understand Dad's reasoning for choosing me, and I accept that, but that doesn't mean I have to like it. Dad's last wish was that I be treated as a hero. Yeah. That didn't work out, and I really don't feel like going into all of that right now. Suffice it to say, that instead, the village decided that I was Kyuubi and hated my guts, because of what was sealed inside my gut. Not to mention that because of said fox, Shinigami gave a nervous chuckle. Naruto, on the other hand, paused to take a deep breath. He began ticking things off one by one, putting his hand in the air. I was never able to make any friends, and the girl I liked thought I was a waste of space. I was assigned to a team where the instructor didn't teach me much at first, and my first C-rank mission had me and my team facing off against the bloody demon of the Bloody Mist. He paused for a moment before moving on to his other hand. Neither of my teammates wanted much to do with me. I end up making one of my first friends in Haku, who dies in front of me, killed by my own sensei. I go through the Chunin exam and discover that most of my taijutsu training from the academy is pretty much useless. He shrugged. Anyway, my best friend, who has only recently begun to respect me, goes and gets a cursed hickey from Petamaru and goes all mental. Naruto continued in this vein of speech for a good 10 minutes, dealing with perverts, Tsunade, the misuse of Chidori, perverts, being unable to effectively control Kyuubi's chakra, the Akatsuki, perverts, and Ero Sennin. But worst of all, Naruto grew sober. I never understood how Hinata felt for so long. Worst of all, I had to watch her die, when it was my fault and I could do nothing to help her. Tell me, Shinigami-sama. His tone was a little scathing for the death god's taste here, but he would let it slide. For now. Where am I supposed to find out that I'm a lucky person in all of this? Arlia smirked. You know Gami-kun, sweetie over there has a point. Maybe it's karma? She speculated. Shinigami simply rubbed his brow. Naruto? Yeah? Take a handful of coins. Frowning, Naruto reached for Gama-chan and poured the contents of the wallet into his hands, being careful not to spill the notes. When Shinigami was serious, he had long decided that listening to him was the best course of action. Alright, so what now? Throw them up in the air and say heads or tails. Naruto shrugged and tossed the 13 coins into the air over a table, figuring there was no harm in it. Heads. He stood motionless as the first coin stopped bouncing and landed with heads visible. As the second, third, and fourth coins all showed heads, his expression gradually changed to astonishment. He was crawling under the bed 10 seconds later, looking for the 13th and final coin. Heads. Shinigami grinned. The god of luck is a friend of mine, and I can see that he has his hands on you. Your luck may not hold in everyday life, but in gambling and such. Kid, you could almost be the new Prince of Ravens. Who? Naruto inquired. Shinigami shook his head. A moniker given to arguably the luckiest man in the multiverse. Naruto smiled. This sounded appealing to him. End of flashback. Oh, shoot, Naruto thought as he saw the incoming fist that he hadn't paid enough attention to avoid. That would teach him not to daydream in the midst of a fight. Despite this, Naruto's instincts served him well. Twisting his body to the right caused his opponent's fist, which would have landed a solid hit to his chest, to simply glance off, sending him stumbling forward. Naruto vividly remembered the lesson Kakashi had taught him on his first day as a genin. Never let your opponent get too close to you. Naruto kicked out at the back of the enemy's knee, causing him to crumple to his knees with his hands still in his pockets. Naruto couldn't resist the motion because it presented a rather tempting target. He would not normally be tempted, but he had discovered this one pushing Hinata around. He was about to put an end to it when Hinata calmly walked away. The bully had jeered and catcalled at her, but Iruka had stopped him before he could. But Naruto had been so proud of Hinata. Someone doing that would have made her cry in the past, but not now. Naruto smirked at the thought. Odds were, at some point, this boy had left Hinata in tears. Shinigami agreed, most likely. Naruto drew back his foot, scowling. Kiba winced, despite his grin, at the thunderous boot that connected with the other boy's rear. His eyes widened, however, when the boy briefly left the ground, tracing a graceful parabolic path in the air before landing with a thump outside the combat circle, his face leaving a small groove in the dirt. That had to be painful. Kiba had seen the boy bullying Hinata and knew Naruto was watching. Kiba, in an unusually wise move, summoned Iruka to the scene instead of attempting to resolve the situation himself. Besides, there was something about Naruto's approach to the two of them that reminded him of a wolf stalking his prey, or perhaps a fox. Uzumaki Naruto is the winner, Iruka declared. Well done, Naruto-kun, Hinata said. Naruto smiled. Many thanks, Hinata-chan. Iruka shook his head as he observed the two children interacting. Naruto had evolved since that day at the council. Not in character, but in the manner in which he acted. He had given his all in every physical exercise in which the academy students competed since that day. And he had triumphed. Repeatedly. He was now arguably one of the academy's best taijutsu fighters, even better than several clan heirs. Unfortunately, his newfound success did not transfer to his academic studies. Hinata had also improved significantly on all fronts. This could have been due to the fact that no one dared to bully the girl anymore. It used to be a common occurrence, but now, if it happened, Naruto would request to spar with them again. He didn't go out of his way to hurt them, but he did something far worse. He humiliated them. Like today, when he completed the entire sparring session without even using his hands. And Iruka was still unable to identify the style. It was becoming increasingly vexing. The bell rang in the distance. The students immediately began preparing to leave. When Kiba approached Naruto and Hinata, he blinked. Normally, the Inuzuka would be among the first to vanish. Iruka crept in quietly to listen in. What happened to you, Naruto? Kiba inquired. Shikamaru, who had been close enough to hear the question, came to a complete stop. He'd been thinking about the same thing for a while. Naruto was able to defeat kids who would have previously beaten the stuffing out of him in an instant. What do you mean, Kiba? Naruto asked, a stupid grin on his face. He and Kiba had been friends back in the academy days, which meant now. Naruto sighed mentally. Even now, the concept of time travel was perplexing. Kiba sighed and rolled his eyes. No, he remained an idiot. I mean, where did you learn to fight that way? Anyo, but Naruto-kun has known how to fight for a long time, Hinata interjected. Choji, who had come to a halt when Shikamaru did, looked at the Hyuga, slightly embarrassed. He was a good boy at heart and didn't want to bring up the fact that Hinata had always thought the blonde could do more than he could. Kiba, on the other hand, was a little brasher. I apologize, Hinata, but... It's true. Everyone in hearing range, except Naruto and Hinata, let out a small gasp of surprise as Sasuke voluntarily spoke comprehensible words other than the standard, HN. The fangirls, on the other hand, simply swooned. Remember a week ago when Hinata was late to the academy and Naruto got really E. If you say emo, Sasuke, I will put my foot up your... The rest of Naruto's threat was drowned out by Sasuke's fangirls' angry screams. Sasuke continued, ignoring the howls of the spawn of hell, as he liked to call them. Naruto became agitated, so Mizuki forced him to fight against that big oppressor, who got his ass handed to him, presumably because he had pissed Naruto off. I concur, the moves that Naruto-san demonstrated, while highly unconventional, were undeniably effective and demonstrated evidence of Naruto-san being exceedingly proficient in their every nuance. Shino had unexpectedly joined the conversation. Kiba only gave the bug boy a sidelong glance. That was the most words he'd ever heard him say in a single sentence. However, translation, please? It's such a pain having to explain this, but Naruto's fighting style, despite being crude, was able to beat the other kids, and it appeared as if Naruto was quite practiced in it. Shino scowled. I only said that. Yes and no, Shino. Yes and no, Shikamaru said, a slight smile on his face. They were interrupted by what sounded like a ferocious beast's growl. Everyone looked at Naruto's stomach, which had just made the noise, with surprise and awe. Naruto chuckled slightly as he rubbed the back of his neck. Do you think we can keep talking over lunch? I'm hungry. That proved to be no issue at all for the others. Except for Sasuke, who simply pointed to the horde. All Naruto needs to do is get rid of the annoyances, Sasuke said, smirking at Naruto's glare before paling and assuming a truly evil expression. Oi! Fangirls! He exclaimed. Murder shone brightly in their eyes. Naruto continued with an apparent disregard for his own personal safety. Yeah, I'm talking to you, you useless kunoichi excuses. You. Naruto-kun. Hinata chastised. Naruto sighed and got straight to the point. They were getting close enough that he could see the whites of their eyes. I'm selling genuine Sasuke merchandise. All of the young females stood up and took notice. Sasuke, on the other hand, had a horrified expression on his face. What are you up to, Dobi? That's right. Come one, come all. I, Uzumaki Naruto, have recently obtained Sasuke's very own used bath towel. Think about it, ladies. This is the very towel that Sasuke used to dry off with after a shower. Naruto decided to stop advertising at this point. If he kept going, he might drown in the amount of drool the rabid females were producing. And all you have to do to get a piece of this limited edition item is prepare your Ryo and speak with my business associate, Mitarashi Anko. Iruka's face turned the color of a white sheet as he learned who Naruto's business associate was. He debated leaving his cover to try to stop. Which was half a second too late, as the girls had already stampeded out of the gate. Iruka groaned, hoping they wouldn't find them. Ah, rough, kunoichi. He had some reservations about it. Who's up for ramen? Naruto asked, a grin threatening to appear on his face. In the end, every member of the Rookie Nine went to eat the food of the gods, including Ino and Sakura. Ino had apparently had Anko pointed out to her by her father as, well, herself. Needless to say, the blonde maintained what she considered a safe distance from the snake summoner. Even though she and Sakura were rivals, Ino had proven incapable of abandoning her. Sakura was grateful for this fact after Naruto had laughingly stopped their group for the 5th time to make room for a group of crying, screaming fangirls fleeing for their lives from a large, apparently hungry snake. Several Anbu had already investigated the incident, but had quickly dropped the case after Anko stated that it was Naruto's idea of a training exercise. Ino and Sakura shivered and decided to give Anko a larger berth than usual. Besides, Ino said quietly, we already have a scrap of his towel. Sakura gave a nod. Inner Sakura expressed herself. CHAA. My Ino pig is bigger than yours. Sasuke blanched, vowing to change the locks on his doors. Once more. They were all seated at the ramen stand 10 minutes later, Naruto and Choji glaring daggers of challenge at each other. Hey, old man Tucci. Keep 'em coming, will ya? This is going to be a fight. Choji expertly twirled both chopsticks in his hands, over his knuckles, between his fingers, and even over the back of his hand, ending with them held perfectly ready. If you dare, feed me. Sakura and Ino scowled as Naruto and Choji devoured bowl after bowl of the noodle dish. Kiba had joined in, though not to the same extent. Shikamaru and Shino's curiosity, on the other hand, would not be deterred. Even if the distraction was some seriously tasty ramen. Troubling, Naruto, Where did you learn to fight like that? Shikamaru inquired. Naruto paused to take a deep breath, wondering absent-mindedly how they would react if he told them he had been taught by the god of death. The streets, he remarked casually before diving into another bowl of ramen. It's best to keep the possibility of divine intervention out of the equation. Aside from Hinata, the other academy students blinked. That was not the response they had anticipated. Huh? Kiba inquired thoroughly. Naruto chewed carefully. I don't use a style, so much as a way of thinking. The human body has a lot of weak spots. When you're little, like me, and you fight a lot of big guys, then you learn where those weak spots are, or you get beaten to a pulp. He didn't say much about getting beaten to a pulp. Kiba laughed. What good are weak points when you come across a jonin? I still think you need a proper style. Naruto gave a nod. Don't worry, Kiba, I'm working on it. Besides, the cool thing about my fighting style is that almost no one ever expects it. Besides, an elite jonin could probably take on hundreds of civilians at once, but all it takes to stop said ninja is a civilian giving him a good old kick in the balls. All the guys in hearing range, including Tucci, crossed their legs or cupped their hands instinctively. You've pretty much already won after that. Shino laughed. I beg your pardon, Uzumaki-san, for finding your rather abrupt, albeit undeniably succinct, explanation insufficient, but it appears to me that there is more to your brawling style than you have admitted. Naruto just stared at Shino, smiling, though his grin twitched every now and then, his eyes were glazed over, and his face was vacant. Shino sighed and decided to dumb it down. There's more to your fighting style than that. There's something you're not telling us. Naruto's face brightened. Oh, why didn't you say so? He stood up and walked around the table, motioning Shino to follow. It's really all about the combos, get it? Naruto turned to the others. The weak points of the body include the eyes, joints, groin, ears, nose, kidneys, and throat, not to mention other internal organs. You've come this far with me? Everyone nodded in agreement. Alright, if I go for the eyes. Naruto slashed at Shino's eyes with lightning speed. The bug user instinctively moved back, entering the limbo position. As a result, he didn't notice Naruto hook his foot around the back of his knee and pull, sending the already wobbly boy crashing to the ground. Unless Naruto caught his flailing arm and pulled him back to his feet. Naruto unashamedly smiled at Shino. So, without a volunteer this time, let's demonstrate that. They could see what would have happened if Naruto had continued to explain it. The strike with jagged fingers at the eyes forces the opponent to instinctively protect their vision, but by leaning back, Shino was unable to see me, leaving himself both open and off balance. The next step is to get them on the ground. The trip, Naruto explained, would have resulted in Shino ending up either on his back or on his rump, where a kick, or simply a heavy stomp, would have ended the fight. Shikamaru raised his head. He could already see several ways out of the situation, and one key factor was that you had to be at least as fast as the guy you were fighting, or catch them off guard. But still. What happened to the last? He wondered. Naruto shifted uneasily. He's still here. I still can't get the academic stuff or the Bunshin no Jutsu to work, and as long as those aren't working, I'm failing the graduation test. Shikamaru dismissed his concerns. There'll be plenty of time before then, but what about all this new stuff? Naruto shook his head. I just learned a lot about my clan, and I don't want to dishonor their memory, so I decided to try a little harder, train a little harder. Sasuke gave a nod. He realized. Oi. Choji. You could have waited for me," yelled Naruto before returning to his eating contest with the appetizingly plump individual. They tallied their score at the end of their meal. Ino and Sakura still hadn't finished their first bowl. Shikamaru had eaten 2 bowls, claiming that any more would have been too troublesome, while Sasuke had eaten 4 bowls, never losing his temper over Naruto's act with his bath towel. After Naruto threatened to put a henge on him to make him look exactly like the blonde before throwing him to the dog, he never lost it again. Wolf, too. Also, lizard. Cat, too. As well as hawk. And, well, suffice it to say, he wore a smile on his face, seemingly enjoying the outing, though the smile began to hurt when Sakura and Ino almost swooned at the sight of it. Surprisingly, when Shino greeted the non-existent Anko, nodding to the thin air behind them, he brought this swooning matter to a halt. He stated blithely that she had just left when the girls turned around with a start. Shino had also matched Sasuke's 4 bowls of ramen, despite the fact that no one had seen him eat. Kiba had almost literally wolfed down 7 bowls of food. This was dwarfed by Choji's massive 15 bowls. He was quite disappointed when Naruto proved to be a better ramen consumer after beating Choji by 4 bowls. The biggest surprise had come when they asked Hinata how many bowls she had eaten. 20, Hinata replied modestly. She was initially concerned about what Naruto would think of her if she ate so much, but Arlia reassured her, saying that Naruto would think it was hilarious that she could eat more than him. And he did, indeed, prove the goddess correct. Holding Hinata's arm high in the air and ignoring her attempts to hide her red face under her jacket collar, Naruto declared her the winner. Following that, he continued to trash-talk everyone else on her behalf. He had found it amusing just the other day. Hinata had eventually found Naruto after much searching and questioning following the council meeting. Although she wasn't sure why, whenever she asked an Anbu where Naruto was, they began to twitch uncontrollably before making the log sign, as if to ward off evil, seemingly unconsciously. She eventually discovered her crush dragging Iruka to this very restaurant. Although she was hesitant, she asked if she could join them after Arlia told her to get that pretty little ass in gear and join them. Now, Iruka had been hesitant at first, at least until Naruto spoke up for her. Flashback. Ah, come on, Iruka-sensei. You'll like Hinata-chan. She's nice. Iruka wondered absent-mindedly if Hinata's face was day glow. Unless. Naruto exclaimed emphatically. Do you not like Hinata-chan? Iruka shifted uneasily. Naruto. Not, it's just that. Hinata, Arlia said, her voice cracking like a whip. Art by secret women no. 4. As Iruka turned to meet Hinata's gaze, he noticed her looking up at him with eyes that grew rounder and rounder, taking up half her face. Tears began to well up at the bottom of those lavender pools, illuminating them with reflected light. Hinata stifled a sniff with her hands clasped just beneath her chin. Iruka was completely miserable. But it took everything Naruto not to glomp the girl with a yell of, kawaii. Shinigami had begun to beat his head against the cold iron bars of Kyuubi's cage inside Naruto's mindscape. Thud, thud. Ow, thud. Ow, ow. Kyuubi stood there, impressed. I'm not sure what the problem is, but I'd say that is one of the most effective applications of the puppy eyes no jutsu I've ever seen. You know how we've been wondering where Arlia keeps disappearing to? Thud. Ow, thud. Back in the real world, Iruka succumbed and nodded firmly. Alright, Hinata, you can come with us. Heck, I just got paid today, so I'll let you both eat as much as you want. He winced slightly as he said that, but he had more than enough money for Naruto, and Hinata was a tiny thing, she probably didn't eat much at all. Arlia chuckled, interpreting the teacher's body language. What a moron. End of flashback. Naruto grinned at Hinata as he called her the reigning ramen champion. I'm going to reclaim that title from you, Hinata. We'll have to get together again someday, okay? Hinata nodded firmly. And Naruto-kun, I'd like that. Perhaps if I let him win, he'll like me more. Arlia smiled indulgently inside her mindscape. Hinata was already being trained to kill, but she was still a child with childish thoughts. Maybe he will, maybe he won't, but if you beat him again, he'll take you out again to try to defeat you again. Hinata's lips curved into a slow smile. Overall, she chose the option that would result in Naruto taking her out to eat more frequently. As the kids laughed happily as they left the ramen stand, they left behind a more thoughtful, more wealthy Tucci. Ayame? He inquired of his daughter. Are you sure, father? That girl, Hinata. Is she close to Naruto? Ayame nodded, smiling indulgently after the pair. They are father. Hinata is Naruto's very best friend, I believe. Don't you think it's good for him to have a friend like that? Yes, Tucci replied thoughtfully, and he meant it. Naruto was almost like family to him, but the businessman was preoccupied with something else, namely the future. He tossed the not insignificant roll of Ryo up and down in one hand, frowning thoughtfully. Even so, it was smaller than the one that Iruka had handed over to him just a few days before. Naruto had apparently been summoned to the council, and Iruka had promised him unlimited ramen if he behaved himself. Hinata had also been present. He still wasn't sure what Hinata had been doing there. Ayame leaned in close and conspiratorially whispered to her father. In fact, I think it's safe to say that Hinata has a bit of a crush on our Naruto, she smiled happily, thinking that the two of them would make a rather cute couple in the future. Tucci's mouth widened with a grin. Is that so? He asked, his words nice and long. Ayame enthusiastically nodded. Just don't tell either of them I said so, she worriedly said. Her father, on the other hand, did not hear her. Tucci saw visions of pale-eyed, blonde-haired children eating staggeringly large amounts of ramen, throwing bills of Ryo like confetti that rained down on the ground all around him. Tucci's white teeth began to gleam in the sunlight. They may be too young to consider such things right now, but in a few years. A nice, private booth, maybe a couple of roses. I wonder if I could hire a good violinist. Oh, yes. He'd be set for life. Hinata was standing with Naruto as he spoke to Sasuke, unaware of Tucci's matchmaking methods. Right, before we begin, you should learn how to climb trees. After scraping the exhausted and unconscious Sasuke off the ground, they carried him home a few hours later. Naruto, on the other hand, did the majority of the carrying. Hinata used her Byakugan to ensure that they were safe from any fangirls who were still on the hunt. Naruto was confident that they would be quick to detect Sasuke's current exhaustion. And, besides, he couldn't just leave him there on the ground. Even after proving to be a greater temerity than Naruto had imagined possible, he did not deserve such a fate. Amy and 3 other girls from Naruto's academy class were crawling around behind a stack of boxes when they suddenly sneezed violently, causing the boxes to topple to the ground. They looked fearfully into the eyes of the large snake from which they had previously hidden. The screams could be heard all the way across Konoha. Ah, Anko replied. It's music to my ears. When Naruto and Hinata arrived at Sasuke's house, they gaped. Big. Naruto exclaimed. Hinata gave a nod. she couldn't remember ever seeing so many different locks on a single door. Sasuke's door was a massive steel structure that appeared to be strong enough to withstand several exploding tags. Arlia blew a whistle. "Do you think all of this is to keep the fangirls away from him?" Hinata inquired. Hinata shook her head helplessly. Arlia laughed. "I'm curious what Naruto would have done if he had discovered his own personal stalker?" Hinata was flushed. "There was no stalking," she mumbled. "What was it, Hinata-chan?" "Eep. And Naruto-kun and nothing." Naruto shrugged and led Sasuke to one of the side windows. He drew a thin-bladed knife from his pocket and slid it into the small gap between the windows, pushing up and lifting the latch. After that, it was a simple matter of opening the windows and shoving Sasuke inside. Naruto didn't even flinch when Sasuke's body landed on the floor with a small thud. Naruto and Hinata both turned around and walked away. They were about to part ways when Hinata, after much prodding from Arlia, summoned the courage to ask him a question. "And Naruto-kun?" "Hello, Hinata-chan?" Naruto wondered what Hinata was about to say. Her stuttering had recently improved, but it still occurred when she became overly nervous. Hinata had a bright tomato-red flush. "Ask him now," Arlia demanded. Would why you like to walk home with me?" she mumbled. Naruto grinned gleefully. "I'd like to meet Hinata-chan." Hinata flushed a deeper red. Arlia prodded, "Now ask him if he'll walk you home without his shirt on." "Eep." Arlia sighed, chuckling slightly to herself. "I know I shouldn't, but it's just too easy sometimes." Naruto scratched his brow, puzzled as to why Hinata had suddenly fainted. It had all been fine. She had been smiling gently at him when he accepted her offer, and then she turned bright red before collapsing unconscious. Kyuubi was laughing inside his seal at Shinigami, who had started banging his head against the bars of his cage once more. Naruto shook his head and pondered. Would it be better if he awoke Hinata, or if he carried her back to the compound in bridal fashion, nice and close to him? A slow grin crossed his features, but the choice was taken away from him when Kurenai appeared. When she saw her favorite girl passed out on the ground, she grabbed her smelling salts and waved them beneath Hinata's nose. Overall, Naruto concluded that it would be a lot more fun when Hinata was awake. The walk to the Hyuga compound had been filled with laughter and conversation. Surprisingly, if Hinata could control her stuttering, she could be a fantastic storyteller. Kurenai was amused by her rendition of Naruto being chased by the Anbu, with Naruto interjecting a sarcastic comment here and there. They had arrived at their destination far too quickly. Naruto let out an audible sigh as he saw Hiashi Hyuga waiting for them at the main gate. Perhaps if he ran now, he'd be able to escape with his life and other things. Unharmed? Hinata stood in front of her father and gave him a bow. "To-san," she softly said. Hiashi nodded to his daughter, a small smile on his lips. Inside, "I think I'll accompany Naruto-san to tonight's poker game," Hinata says. If Naruto wasn't too busy hiding behind Hinata, he might have struggled to keep a grin off his face. "Please, please, please, don't let Hinata's father murder me," he prayed. Shinigami laughed. "Don't worry, kid. Your girlfriend's father will not kill you. She is not my friend." Still in denial, Naruto yelled at the death god. He was unaware that rumors about his relationship with the Hyuga heiress had already begun to circulate throughout the village. Yet, Shinigami said, his voice full of promise. "And also evil." "Nani?" Hinata was whisked away from Naruto, leaving him sheepishly looking up at Hiashi. Hehehe. Hiashi-sama, let us just take a moment to breathe so that we don't do anything rash. Hiashi gave Naruto a friendly smile. Don't worry, Uzumaki-san. I have no intention of hurting you tonight. Naruto swallowed. I do, however, have a few questions for you. Kurenai stared nervously at the two men. Hopefully, nothing negative will come of this. What are your plans for my daughter? Naruto almost got his face slapped. He was certain that Hiashi's first question would be about Yurei. This astonished him. She's my best friend, he stated flatly. Hiashi smirked. I'm not sure I trust you to be her friend, he expressed doubt. Naruto simply looked at the clan head, trying to calm the bubbling rage that had suddenly appeared within his stomach, and answered, his voice emotionless. It's funny, I'm not sure I trust you to be her father. Hiashi locked his gaze on Naruto. Watch it, boy. Speaking to me in that manner is not wise. Naruto arched his brow at the imposing figure of his female friend's father. Does the truth hurt? He inquired sympathetically. Kurenai exclaimed. Hiashi grabbed Naruto by the collar of his jacket and lifted him up to eye level, seeing red. Listen up, boy. No, you pay attention. Kurenai shivered as she noticed the difference in the two men's speech. Hiashi was enraged. But Naruto. Naruto spoke with a biting cold that emphasized his words. And he was not created to listen. Do you know how many times Hinata has cried because of you? How many times she pulls herself down every single damn day because of you? How much she longs to hear just a kind word because of you? How much she wishes she didn't belong to her clan because of you? Naruto's anger was palpable as he addressed Hiashi. Hiashi's pupils dilated. Naruto raised an accusatory finger. Admittedly, you've improved since it was pointed out to you in some rather harsh circumstances, but deep down, she still believes that whatever you're doing for her now is nothing more than an act, and frankly, I don't blame her. Hiashi threw Naruto to the ground. You have no idea what you're talking about, he said, as if he were trying to persuade himself rather than Naruto. What is Hinata's favorite cuisine? Hiashi smirked. What has this got to do with? Where is Hinata's favorite place for cinnamon rolls and zenzai? Hiashi appeared a little shady. Is that her room? The garden. The majority of the Hyuga clan avoids it. What is Hinata's hobby? Hiashi's eyes blinked. Did she have a pastime? Kurenai said softly, flower pressing. Naruto gave a nod. How does she use the herbs she picks? Does it press them? Hiashi inquired hesitantly. Naruto raised his head. Why does she use them to make a medicinal cream? For cuts or bruises, Hiashi stated emphatically. Naruto shook his head. It's for her own use after her training sessions with her family, so no one else knows how frequently she gets beaten at home. Hiashi grimaced. How does she fare at the academy? Hiashi remained silent. She is bullied on a nearly daily basis. Hiashi's pupils dilated. His daughter was targeted? That is not something any parent wants to hear. Why didn't she tell me? He asked quietly. Naruto could still hear him. Because she was afraid you'd see it as another sign of weakness and beat her for it, he explained, as if to a small child. Hinata's father jumped. Why is she being bullied? Hiashi shook his head in frustration. Being a Hyuga who overestimates herself. Naruto snorted at the staring Hiashi at this point. Isn't it ironic? How many friends does she have? Demanded Naruto. You. Naruto mocked applause by clapping his hands several times. One could argue that he was just a little irritated with Hiashi. Well done, you got one right. Hiashi remained silent. Naruto leaned forward, his gaze fixed on Hiashi. You say you don't trust me to be your daughter's friend? You don't even know me, let alone your own daughter. Hiashi deflated like a punctured balloon. Kurenai was certain she had never seen the Hyuga Lord look so downcast. I'm getting better, he stammered. About bloody time, Naruto snarled. When were you planning on starting? Naruto couldn't help but let some of the raw pain he felt enter his words. When your eldest child lay on her deathbed after a mission gone wrong, or after she saves a teammate's life at the cost of her own, having lived her entire life believing that her beloved father hates her very existence. Hiashi visibly flinched. Kurenai yelled, Naruto. You take it too far. No, he's right, Hiashi said after regaining control. He knows my daughter better than I ever have, despite only being friends with her for a few months and being her father for her entire life, Hiashi said, activating his Byakugan. What do you know about a man named Yurei? Naruto cocked his brow at him. Have you not already asked me this? Answer me, and don't think of lying. These eyes see everything. Naruto smirked and approached Hiashi. Shinigami had gone over everything with him. Flashback. Look, kid, when you lie, your body gives small signs that indicate that you are lying. Most of the time, these twitches are imperceptible, but a person trained to see them would have no trouble at all. Every Hyuga is trained to spot these signals. It's what allows them to react to things so quickly. Those small muscle twitches give people away, and the Byakugan, of course, helps tremendously. Then how am I supposed to do anything but tell them the truth without getting caught? Spluttered Naruto. Kyuubi raised his head. The boy could be quite dense at times. Easy kid, keep those muscles still. Naruto's eyes widened, as did the smile that spread across his face gradually. End of flashback. Who would have guessed that learning Sage Mode would have so many secondary applications? Naruto pondered. Shinigami simply nodded. Not to mention you have a great poker face. I've never heard of a man named Yurei. Hiashi smirked. The youngster was not lying. He's been training me for a while, Hiashi began. He wasn't telling the truth. The grass is blue, the sky is green, and my favorite food is sushi. I'm a personal friend of the Shinigami and his wife. Shinigami sobbed, that was uncalled for. Naruto was now having a good time. I come from the future, when Konoha was completely destroyed by a single man, whom I then defeated. I like ramen. And you can't tell if I'm lying, can you? Hiashi just stood there staring at the blonde. How? He asked, his voice tinged with fear? Naruto laughed. I've been hiding my emotions behind a mask since I was 2 years old, and it's paid off. Kurenai stared between the two men, completely perplexed and unsure what to do. Fortunately, a memorable guest broke up the argument. Gaki. Anko appeared out of nowhere and wrapped Naruto in a large hug, smothering his head between her. Well, the action made passing men envious. Naruto, however much he may or may not have enjoyed the sensation, was panicking and waving his arms, as breathing was becoming difficult for him. Anko finally let him go, allowing him to take a deep breath of life-giving air. The strategy worked, kid. Naruto looked at her, taken aback. Really? It did? Anko smiled and nodded. Kurenai, on the other hand, was suspicious. What plan? What plan? Anko explained cheerfully, oblivious to Naruto's emphatic waves and shaking of the head telling her not to. It was all the Gaki's idea, Kurenai. You see, we were both a little short on cash for the poker game tonight, so the kid borrowed Sasuke Uchiha's bath towel. Then he told all the girls in his class about it and told them that I had it. I made sure that I was easily found and explained the rules to them. There was only a limited amount of fabric, so only 10 people could buy pieces of the towel. It's still daylight, Anko. Exactly. We charged them all a wad of cash to enter, and now that they're all caught, we can go play poker. Anko handed Naruto a large stack of cash. As he began to count his cut, the boy had the grace to blush self-consciously. Kurenai locked his gaze on Naruto. Do you want to say anything about yourself, Uzumaki-san? I wonder how much we'd have gotten if the prize had been Sasuke's boxers? Muttered Naruto, unconsciously. Sasuke shivered as he regained consciousness, a sense of profound dread nearly overwhelming him. The guard outside the poker game's door was perplexed by the scene in front of him, which was understandable. Naruto was lying on the ground, clutching the large raised lump on his head. Kurenai appeared to be pleased with herself. Hiashi appeared to be befuddled. Anko simply laughed at his anguish. Aside from entertainment, Anko said, wiping her tears away. Let's go win some money, she said as she opened the door with a predatory grin. Naruto frowned at the sign nailed to the front door, which stated that the host was not liable for any sprains, bruises, broken bones, bruised egos, or accidental death sustained during the game. It also stated that strange shinobi habits, such as extreme prejudice, would be used to punish flames of youth. Naruto smirked as he walked into the establishment. There was a sizable crowd gathered around the poker table. This gathering included the clan heads of the Nara, Yamanaka, Akamichi, Inuzuka, Aburame, and Hyuga. That wasn't even taking into account the fact that all of the soon-to-be Jonin-sensei, Ibiki, and, judging by the horrified expressions on their faces when Naruto walked through the door, at least a couple of Anbu were seated around the table. Yoshino Nara, strangely, stood at the back of the group, holding, of all things, a cast-iron frying pan. I hope we're not too late? Anko asked cheerfully as he took a seat at the table. No, you're not, Kakashi replied. Naruto's jaw dropped as he noticed his old, future sensei at a meeting earlier than him. May I inquire, however, why Uzumaki-san is here? He's my +1, Anko said, roguishly winking. Naruto gulped and shifted his gaze away from the snake summoner. A little young for you, isn't he? Ibiki smirked. A little too young for anyone right now, thank you, Naruto grumbled. Hiashi expelled a large breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Alright, let's get this party started, Shuza, who was acting as the bank, said. The two handed over their money and received an equal amount of chips without saying anything. Conversation began to circulate around the table as the game progressed. I hear some of you are going to act as Jonin-sensei with the upcoming graduation classes, said one of the aforementioned Anbu. I already have a very young team, Guy said, smiling. Surprisingly, he was quite good at poker, most likely because no one wanted to stare at him for too long and thus couldn't tell if he had a good hand or not. Well, I'm going to be on the best team of all, Naruto declared confidently, a wide smile on his face. And why would that be the case? Kakashi asked, a little sluggishly. Naruto simply stared at him as if he were a moron. Of course, I'll be on it. Aren't you the dead last of the academy? Mocked one of the Anbu. Aren't you the next one on the list for after I've done one of my bigger pranks? Naruto asked, casually tossing a few chips into the pot, enough to raise it by several hundred ryo. The Anbu in question paled and dropped his cards, which landed face up, removing him from the game. Naruto observed that if he had kept his terror under control, he appeared to have won that hand. I'm sorry, were those cards good? Naruto joked. Anko burst out laughing at the ANBU's misfortune. Her laughter was cut short by Kurenai's glare as she mouthed, "Behave," to her friend. Anko sighed. But she paled before flashing a wide grin in response to Yoshino's warning glare. With the ANBU's flush out of the way, the betting began in earnest, albeit in cash only. Finally, it was just Naruto, Ibiki, and Guy, who were still working hard. Guy folded after much thought about the stake, his cards, and the still substantial amount of chips left to him, stating that as punishment, he would win the next round, and if he couldn't, he would run around Konoha 5 times on his hands. And if he couldn't do that, he'd climb the Hokage monument, and if that didn't work, Yoshino, who had been speaking quietly to Sume at the time, calmly walked over to him and whacked him over the head with the cast iron frying pan that seemed to be on hand for this specific purpose, wincing slightly as the reverberations traveled up her arm. Naruto wondered absent-mindedly what kind of hair gel Guy used to transform his bowl cut into such an effective helmet. You should fold right now, kid, I'd feel bad taking money from a child, Ibiki smirked. Naruto simply curled his lip in a half-smile, exposing his elongated canines. It's funny you should say that, Ibiki-sama. I'd feel bad taking money from an old man in need. Ibiki raised the pot yet again. Naruto was equal to him. You're nervous, kid. I can tell. You keep shifting in your seat. Your eyes glance to the pot, to your cards, to mine. You're already wondering what you're going to do for cash once I take all your money away from you. Ibiki's eyes bore into Naruto, but he made no impact. Nervous? What? Are my pupils dilating? Yours are. Are my eyes twitching? Yours are. As for shifting in my seat, I'm hyperactive and I need to pee. Naruto grinned ferociously. Ibiki stiffened slightly. I don't perspire. While this was going on, the spectators who had already folded watched with wide eyes as the final 2 poker players attempted to read each other's minds. Guy, who had never even lost consciousness, muttered something about flames of youth, before flinching slightly as Yoshino threatenedly raised her weapon. Arlia would adore that lady. It took everything Naruto had to keep a straight face in the face of this statement. Shall we then lay down the cards? Naruto challenged. Yes. Let's. Ibiki slowly placed his cards on the table, revealing 4 tens and a king. 4 of a kind, he said slyly. Naruto stared at the cards, horrified. Ouch. You're good, he said, his face depressed. And that just adds to the agony, he sighed as he flipped a 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 onto the table, all of which were clubs. And the pot goes to Naruto Uzumaki, who hammered my boss with a straight flush. Anko exclaimed, before blowing a raspberry at Ibiki, who was staring at him. Good luck next time, old man. Naruto gave Anko a thoughtful look before breaking into another evil grin. He's getting quite good at those, Kyuubi said, pleased with the kit. Ibiki-sama? He innocently inquired. Ibiki was immediately alert. When Naruto pretended to be innocent, you just knew something bad was going to happen to someone. Yes? He replied warily. You're Anko's boss, aren't you? Ibiki almost sighed in relief. He wasn't going to be the target this time. Yes. In that case, I'd be willing to let you keep half your chips if you could persuade Anko-san to teach me a thing or two about poisons and antidotes. The thought made everyone in the room pale. Of course not right away, Naruto clarified. The room breathed a collective sigh of relief. However, when I become a genin, surely Anko-san could spare some time to teach me in those training with me about her craft. Ibiki looked at Anko, who was violently shaking her head, indicating an emphatic no. He hadn't forgiven her for the old man remark. I'm sure that could be arranged, Uzumaki-san, at least 2 days a week for 3 months? Naruto asked, grinning at Anko, whose kunai pouch Kurenai had just seized. Naruto's duck was only just fast enough to take her shuriken pouch. 6, Ibiki replied, evilly smiling at his subordinate. Who knows, it could teach her some discipline. Sen, EJASH. The air was filled with a loud clang. It was a good clang, worthy of mention, complete with the distinctive WHOIOIOIOIOINNGGG sound of a well-executed clang. Long after Anko had hit the ground with swirls in her eyes, the sound continued to fill the air. Naruto gulped, realizing for the first time why Shikamaru constantly referred to women as troublesome. No jutsu in the poker room, Yoshino snarled, having just stopped Anko's striking shadow snakes with extreme prejudice. Are we clear? She demanded, holding the slightly crumpled frying pan out in front of her as if it were a weapon of mass destruction, which it had become in her hands. Ma'am, yes ma'am, chanted the shinobi as one. Shikamaru's mother nodded contentedly. Now, boy. Her whip-like voice screamed at Naruto, who immediately stood to attention, knocking over his chair. Yes, ma'am, he exclaimed. Why do you want to know about poisons? Yoshino inquired, her tone slightly judgmental. This made Naruto frown. That tone of voice bothered him. Well, I don't like it when the food I buy at some stores has some extra ingredients in it. Nothing lethal, just enough to ruin my day. It'd be nice to be able to identify the poisons before eating them. Yoshino's pupils dilated almost imperceptibly. Don't worry, dear. I'm sure Anko will be delighted to assist you. Ibiki snorted. Aren't you right, Morino? Yes, ma'am, he sobbed. Shikaku Nara finally let out a muffled chuckle at this point. Luckily, his wife did not hear him. Anko. If you disagree with this arrangement, speak up now or forever remain silent. Naruto grimaced. Could you please phrase that a little differently? Are you complaining? Kakashi inquired. Yeah, he's complaining, and he's not the only one. If the Hyuga girl finds out, I might end up being sealed into another girl. Isn't that a little under the belt? Wasn't that the whole point? Could we please not discuss points in relation to my... Well, you know, Naruto thought to his tenants. Shinigami's voice became thoughtful. Alright, besides, I don't think that would actually happen. I think it would be some mysterious disappearances. After all, if I'm right, and if Arlia has her way, which she almost always does, then Hinata wouldn't want to damage the goods so that when you two are older you can. I don't want to hear any longer. Yes, you did. Do you know you two are both perverts? We are not perverts, they declared as one, we are extreme perverts. As a pure white light suddenly illuminated both of them, they declared. Naruto's terrified scream reached the heavens. A white-haired old man with a thin line of drool coming from the corner of his mouth sneezed in tea country. My common sense is tingling. Either more have joined the ranks of the super pervert, or someone other than me is attempting to corrupt my godson. Anime tears streamed down his face. Today is a lucky day for those who adore the female form. He yelled in a voice reminiscent of a certain green-clad Jonin and his favorite young student. Jiraiya froze at a distinct, syncopated cracking sound. I know that sound, he whispered, turning around to face the horde of women behind him, water still dripping down their towel-clad bodies. And what bodies? Jiraiya thought as a small trickle of blood ran from his left nostril. Due to their hasty exit from the onsen, my sensei was an excellent teacher. He demonstrated exactly what I should do if confronted by the creators of that sound. The women just shrugged before charging at the pervert, but Jiraiya backflipped away, his hands in the ram sign, and when he hit the ground, he immediately began charging his chakra, so much so that it became visible, swirling around him in blue ropes as dust and pebbles began to lift into the air. My sensei was a legend in his own right, the shinobi god. I trained one of the greatest ninjas to ever walk this or any other land. I, too, became known and feared throughout the world as one of the legendary Sannin through battle, sweat, tears, and blood. I am Mount Myoboku's sage, the wise and immortal spirit. The author of fantastic books. That's correct. I am the all-powerful Toad Sage. Although his chakra had reached its peak, a whistling sound could be heard by his power as it mixed with the air, creating a wind that tore several towels away from their nervous grasp. Jiraiya continued to speak, his voice rising, as his hands slowly began a long series of hand signs. Now tremble in fear, ye who have made that forbidden sound, as I unleash the technique devised by both myself and my sensei to deal with the likes of you. Several women gulped in terror as he reached his final hand sign, the rat, and Jiraiya yelled out the name of the dreaded technique. Art of the Sannin and Kami no Shinobi. Run like a bitch no jutsu. The woman blinked at the cloud of dust left in Jiraiya's wake before charging after the booking pervert with a bloodthirsty howl, but he was already gone. Wow, Kakashi exclaimed, I didn't think he'd take it so hard. Perhaps he knows Anko-chan better than I imagined. As Yoshino struck again, his face collided with the poker table, scattering several of his chips everywhere. Kakashi. No causing trauma to the minor. As for you, dear, you might need to breathe right now because if you don't stop screaming, you might find yourself unable to do so. Naruto blushed and stopped screaming, not realizing he had been doing so aloud. Well, Anko-chan hasn't objected, so I guess you've got yourself and your team a poison trainer once you graduate, Ibiki said as he walked over to Anko and poked her with the toe of his boot. Naruto smiled broadly and pushed the agreed-upon number of chips over to Ibiki's pile. Should we go ahead and wake her up now? Should we continue playing without her? Wolf inquired of the group. Chose's wife walked in almost as soon as he finished speaking, carrying a large platter of food. Anyone for Dango? With a friendly smile, she inquired. Anko was back in her seat with her two hands completely full of dango sticks after a blur of motion. Thank you very much, Mrs. Akamichi. Where were we before? The game resumed after Anko calmed down after learning that she had been shanghaied into teaching a bunch of little snots and a bastard of a blonde. Naruto took much of Shinigami's advice as he played the game, not wanting the other players to notice that he had far more winning hands than was likely, but the pile of chips in front of him was larger than any other on the table. Finally, it was time for the final hand of the night. As Naruto was dealt his cards, he felt something. An instinct, if you will. He knew that the hand he had been dealt was a winning one, and so he was not surprised when he looked at his cards and saw what he had been dealt. I just don't think it makes much sense. He expressed his displeasure. What exactly do you mean, Naruto-kun? Everyone except Anko and Kurenai had been calling him Uzumaki-san at the start of the game, but as time passed, the other players around the table began to warm up to him, and he had specifically told them that he would prefer it if they called him by his first name, as being called Uzumaki-san made him feel old. Well, the training, I mean, just having one sensei, Naruto replied to the Yamanaka clan head's question. Over the course of many years, Naruto-san, this method of training has produced hundreds of excellent shinobi. Sume interjected mildly, who are you to say it's not correct? Naruto flushed, me? Nobody, in fact. And I'm not saying it's wrong. It's just. He paused, seemingly searching for the words, before brightening and pointing to Kakashi, Kurenai, and Asuma. The three blinked owlishly, and the boy was surprisingly knowledgeable. Yes, Kakashi replied for everyone. Well, Naruto said, motioning to Kurenai. Kurenai-san is a genjutsu expert, correct? So, logically, she would be the best candidate for genjutsu instruction. Asuma is a tactics and weapons specialist, so he would mostly focus on teaching those subjects, he hurried on, as Asuma opened his mouth to interrupt. Yes, I am aware that you are also proficient in ninjutsu and taijutsu, but your most frequently employed jutsu is the hine, or flying swallow, which you employ with your chakra blades. Your taijutsu technique is also heavily reliant on those same blades. Asuma nodded slightly and opened his hands wide, conceding the point. Naruto-kun, what about me? What's your specialty? Kakashi asked, his eyes smiling at him. Tardiness, Naruto replied quickly, his face faulted as the rest of the room laughed at the blunt yet accurate statement. However, from what I've heard, you're the most well-rounded shinobi among the others, and your specialty would have to be ninjutsu. Kakashi's eyes smiled again. And, according to what I've heard, Gai-san is a taijutsu expert, correct? Yash. You are extremely perceptive, young one. In fact, you could say that your passion burns alongside the flames of you. Cue frying pan, Shinigami said cheerfully, overjoyed that he wasn't on the receiving end this time. Naruto continued, ignoring the dazed guy, who had been hit much harder this time. Wouldn't it make more sense for you to all teach something about what you're good at? The boy makes a valid point. Everyone turned to look at the person who had made this statement. Despite playing the entire game, these were Shibi Aburame's first words of the night. Although his suggestion is not exactly a method of teaching that adheres to the established ethnicities of shinobi education, I find it disturbingly difficult to refute the male adolescent's logic, Shibi continued, pushing his sunglasses, which he wore even when inside, up the bridge of his nose. Naruto's eyes blinked. Translation? He spoke quietly to Anko. Hell if I know, she replied with a smile from the corner of her mouth. He said it might be against tradition, but you've got a point, Hiashi replied, smirking slightly at Naruto's perplexity. As a result, I believe it would be prudent for us to propose that the juvenile's idea be implemented on a probationary basis for an agreed-upon period of time in order to determine whether or not this experimental program would benefit the graduating students from the learning establishment. And once more? Naruto inquired of Hiashi. He believes we should try your idea on a trial basis. Cool. The sensei, on the other hand, frowned. While it may end up improving the individual skills of the genin, at what cost? Konoha fought on the principle of teamwork, and if the students did not spend as much time as possible with their team, would they be able to build up the necessary rapport for when they were confronted with a difficult situation? I'm not sure about this, Asuma murmured, and Kurenai nodded emphatically. Oh, please, come on. Naruto pouted, absently wishing he could perform the puppy eyes jutsu as well as Hinata. He would have had them all in the palm of his hand. Why don't we include it in the final hand? Might Guy inquired, a fire in his eyes, certain of his victory. That's a good idea, Anko added. Remember how you folded? Naruto did a deadpan. Indeed. In fact, the only players left in the game are Kakashi, Kurenai, Asuma, Guy, and Naruto, Hiashi said as he counted them all off. Okay, then. As he pushed his large pile of chips into the center of the table, Naruto exclaimed. All in. And if I win this pot, all of the remaining players must bring their genin teams together at least twice a week for cross-training. You're a self-assured little scoundrel, aren't you? Kurenai inquired, a smirk spreading across his face as Naruto stuck his tongue out at her. What else will you provide? You may have more cash than us, but what you're asking for is worth a lot more than just Ryo, Kakashi said as he pushed all of his chips into the pot. Naruto smirked. Good point. Okay, for every 500 Ryo more than I put in the pot, I'll promise not to prank anyone in Konoha for a week. Every Anbu in the room silently pushed all of the chips in front of them into the pot. Shikaku raised one eyebrow at them. Don't you realize that none of you were actually in the game? We're all aware of that, Nara-sama, Wolf replied calmly, his voice tinged with hope. He can't be that bad, can he? Yoshino wondered. Wolf said nothing but one word. Yoshino's eye began to twitch madly before she reached over her husband's shoulder and added his chips to the pile. She still had nightmares about trying to scrub that red stuff off every deer's nose in the Nara clan's entire herd. Shikaku sighed. Troublesome. Youuuuuuuuthh. Gaia exclaimed as he went all in. He would normally have been punished for this infraction. However, everyone was too preoccupied with the game's outcome to care at the time. What do you think, Kurenai? Asuma inquired of his love interest. Shall we join in on the fun? Kurenai nodded, her cheeks flushed red. Let's. The next order of business would be for you all to sign a contract stating that you will keep your word after the outcome, Choza suggested, although perhaps not so unexpectedly. Many members of the Akamichi clan compete in eating contests in which money and promises are bet and made at regular intervals. It had become standard practice to document these types of things in order to prevent one of the contestants from breaking their promise. Each person signed their name to the hastily drafted contract, which was then added to the pot one by one. The pot was the largest of the night at this point, and one of the largest that most of the players could recall ever seeing. Naruto sighed contentedly, leaned back in his chair, and gazed lovingly at the heap of loot in front of him. Normally, at this point, we'd show our cards one by one, building up the suspense, and I'd be the last one to show my hand, unveiling it in some dramatic fashion that would leave you all gasping and groaning, but I can't be stuffed right now. He threw a 10, 3 faces, and an ace, all of spades, on top of the table, in full view of everyone in the room. So, unless someone can beat that, I'll leave you right now. Several Anbu began to cry as Naruto exited the room, his winnings in a sack thrown over his shoulder. Hey, kid, remember that outfit you had to go get to escape your own stench on the first day you came back? Shinigami inquired. Naruto gave a nod. Yep, I've got it sealed right here, he said as he patted one of his top pockets. Good, good, you finally have enough money to finish that game after all you won from it. Hey yeah. You're right. Naruto exclaimed, a large, vulpine grin on his face. However, this quickly turned into a frown. I wonder if they'll still be open? After all, it's getting late. Kit, in case you haven't noticed, you live in a ninja village, Kyuubi interrupted. No. Really? And all this time I thought we were a samurai village. Smartass. My point is, this is a ninja village. The shop is a shop of ninja stores. Now, one thing about ninjas is that they don't often keep to the regular day hours, so the store is probably still open. You might want to run there just in case, Shinigami advised. Naruto discovered that he did not need to flee after all. The shop was still open and would be for a while. It was also thanks to Kyuubi's reminder that Naruto remembered to perform the same henge no jutsu he had performed the previous time he entered the shop. When he returned, his sack of cash was significantly lighter than he had anticipated. The reason for this was straightforward: chakra metal. His greaves and vambraces were both made of chakra-conducting metal, while his matte black chainmail was made of a very light, very sturdy metal that provided excellent protection as well as a full range of movement. Overall, it was a good buy, and it was the last one they had in stock. Man, I look good in everything, don't I? He chuckled. That was a comment, not a question. He snapped, almost feeling his traveling companions' mouths open. Alright, Naruto, get dressed. We're going back to the top of the Hokage's monument. Naruto gulped as he looked up at the sky and the dark cloud head that was heading their way. Are you sure? It appears that a storm is brewing in our direction. Yes, now that the storm has passed, it's even better. Naruto sighed and did as he was told. If you say so. After all, you're in charge. Oh, I am so much more than that, Shinigami said, a tight smile on his face. It took him only a few minutes to get to his parents' old cottage at the top of the Hokage heads, but he'd had plenty of practice. Alright, Shinigami-sama. I'm here. Now what? Climb to the very top of the tallest tree on the cliff's edge. Shrugging slightly, Naruto searched the cliff edges on foot, squinting up into the darkness and mentally thanking his enhanced vision as he could make out the tips of the trees against the star-spangled sky. He shivered slightly as the wind, which was always present at this height, began to pick up, cutting through his jacket and chilling his flesh. He eventually found the necessary tree and began walking up it. No, Shinigami replied. Naruto's chakra suddenly spiked, as it hadn't done since he began the most basic of control exercises, launching him off the tree. What the hell? Naruto yelled to be heard above the howling wind. Climb it, Shinigami said flatly, but this is something that must be done without chakra. Climbing was much more difficult without the assistance of his chakra. The wind buffeted and tore at him, attempting to yank him from his sometimes perilous perch. It was strong, always pushing against him, but Naruto slowly made his way up towards the top of his tree, inch by inch, handhold by handhold. The fact that the tree moved with the wind, swinging and bending as it tried to survive one of nature's elements and forces made it even more difficult. And the higher Naruto went, the more the branch he was holding swung and bucked beneath him. Finally, huffing and puffing from one of the most difficult workouts in a long time, Naruto reached the top of his tree, clutching its tip with all four limbs. Get up. What? Get up and move. Naruto struggled to do so before a particularly strong gust of wind blew him back to all fours, clutching the tree once more. Get up. Naruto pushed himself back to his feet 3 times, fighting the storm and the wind's power while still forbidden to use any chakra to aid him in his task. The wind knocked him down to his knees 3 times. This time. This time for sure. He grumbled, his voice tinged with annoyance. With a wordless cry, he pushed himself back to his feet, constantly pushing against the wind. The wind pushed him back, knocking him off the top of the tree. As he fell, he screamed, the branches slamming into his body as he descended toward the ground. He reached desperately for a long, thin branch, grasping it with terrified strength to slow his fall. Even with the fingerless gloves he wore with this outfit, Naruto winced at the burn caused by the friction of slowing his plummeting plunge, but he had succeeded in stopping his fall. How come you're not at the top, Naruto? Shinigami inquired mildly. With a groan, Naruto dragged himself back to the top of the tree, climbing hand over hand, making sure that each foothold was secure and not wobbly from the wind. He had returned to the swaying top of the tree. You're on your feet. Panting, Naruto realized that this was not something he could do on his own. How? He inquired, his tone rough. You are fighting the wind, one of the most powerful destructive forces on the planet. You will not win. Accept it. Learn from it. Move with it. Feel the wind as it surrounds you. Feel its caress against your skin. Feel its eddies and flows. Strive to understand its unpredictability. Naruto rose to his feet slowly, listening to Shinigami's words as they passed through his mind. Because the wind is always around us, we sometimes underestimate it, take it for granted, until something happens to remind us that the wind is there. Naruto began to bend his body gracefully, attempting to match the swaying of his unstable footing. We cannot see the wind, smell it, or taste it, but we can hear it as it whistles through its surroundings, hear the wind as it howls all around you, and we can always feel the wind's touch as it blows through our hair, as it blows against our face. Kyuubi placed his head between his paws, his tails limp, as a strong sense of nostalgia overcame him inside the seal etched on Naruto's belly. To feel the wind stroking through his fur again, carrying so many scents to him. To be able to hear the music as it rushed all around him. A deep yearning grew within the nine-tailed demon fox's heart as he sighed. Above all, wind is free. You cannot cage the wind, because once you do, it is no longer wind, only air. Know this. Understand this. Feel this. The wind is always in motion, never allowing itself to halt, because if it did, it would no longer be a wind, only air, stagnant, unmoving, still. Naruto kept moving, taking deep breaths as he did so, sensing the start of something. Despite this, he had no idea what it was. Struggling to gain a better understanding of that feeling, he reached for it and was thus unprepared for the change in the wind, forcing him to wrap all four limbs around the tree once more to keep himself from falling. You didn't feel it, Shinigami gently reprimanded. Feel, it's all about feel, isn't it? Naruto huffed, blowing away some of the rain that had begun to fall on his face. The rain had only begun a few moments before, but it was already pouring heavily. Alright, you want me to feel, huh? Naruto wrapped his legs around a tree branch, shucking his jacket, chainmail, and shirt, shivering slightly as the rain-filled gale traced its fingers across his torso. Close your eyes this time. When you close your eyes, your other senses compensate, which should help. Naruto rose to his feet once more, bringing his arms up as he inhaled deeply, taking the wind into himself, before exhaling once more, adding to the wind around him. Even as the wind picked up, sending the tip of the tree in whip-like motions, he maintained his perfect center of balance. That's it, Shinigami said quietly. Feel it. Ride the wind. Follow and lead at the same time. Slowly, Naruto began to move as he stood on top of the tree, twisting and rotating his upper and lower torso as his arms began to move with the wind around him. Nonetheless, he gradually increased his speed, following the wind's movements. Now accept it. Draw it in. You can feel the breeze. Now become one with it. Naruto summoned the wind without even realizing it, and the wind responded. The roaring could be heard as it rushed around him. He could feel the lashing of rainwater as it was driven at his skin by the force of the wind. He exclaimed as he felt the wind for the first time. You can feel it flowing through you, around you. Draw it in. Draw it through. Naruto was never able to explain what happened in that moment when he became one with the wind and the storm until the end of his days. All he knew was that something happened in that moment, with the rain pelting him, lightning flashing all around him, and the wind, that glorious wind howling like wolves to the heavens above. He inhaled deeply, feeling a power within him that he had never felt before. "Bring your eyes open." Naruto gradually reopened his eyes. He made no movement, nothing revealed his stunned state as the world around him changed as he stood in the center of the shifting wind. "Do you get it now?" "Yes," he said quietly, his voice lost in the din of the storm. "Do you sense it?" "Yes." "Now, kid, you're prepared to meet and warn the Sandaime." Closing his eyes once more, Naruto spread his arms wide and leapt off the tree and over the cliff face. Lightning struck the tip of the tree right where he had been standing, severing it in two. And yet, Naruto was unconcerned as he fell to the ground, the wind surrounding him and cushioning his fall. He was the wind at the time, and the wind was him. He could fly and was flying free at the time. Despite Shinigami's declaration that he was ready to meet the Hokage, Naruto chose to play it safe. Doing otherwise, he reasoned, would be a little reckless. Shinigami and Kyuubi both snorted in response. It was incredible to see what a slight shift in perspective could do for Naruto's planning abilities. Flashback. "It's like getting ready for a prank, you know?" Shinigami and Kyuubi both stared blankly at Naruto. "Huh?" they both asked, their tone indicating their confusion. "Well, pulling off a master prank takes a lot of planning and effort, not to mention knowing everything about your equipment, so there is very little chance, under any circumstances, that it will do something you don't want it to." The two immortal males remained perplexed. Naruto's face flushed as he realized he had to explain something to someone else for the first time. It was usually the other way around. "I haven't had any training with my new equipment, and you haven't told me anything about what that drawing on the wind thing can actually do," he said, pointing to the Shinigami. "And I'm not going to," Shinigami stated calmly. "EHH!" yelled Naruto. "That is for you to discover. The technique you learned under my tutelage is a seal-less, internalized jutsu, one of the most powerful in existence. This technique can only be learned by those with an extremely high wind affinity, and its uses are unique to each user, save one, which is present in all." "So, what's that one?" Naruto inquired. "I'm not telling you," Shinigami exclaimed to an enraged Naruto. His expression became solemn. "However, the only true limitation of this technique is you." "Well, that didn't sound ominous at all. Anyway, what I meant with the prank was that I'm going to take some time to get used to my new equipment before storming the tower." "Of course, I knew that," Shinigami hurriedly replied. "Of course you did." End of flashback. It was now 3 weeks to the day after Naruto had first felt the wind. He decided that tonight would be the night he saw the Sandaime as Yurei. If he had stuck to his original plan, he would have had to wait another week. However, there was a compelling reason for him to visit the third on this particular night. The climate. Another storm was expected to hit Konoha tonight, according to the radio. And, if the reports are correct, it will be a storm with some of the strongest winds ever recorded. Shinobi were still hard at work, putting extra weight on the roofs, tying things down, battening down the hatches, and preparing for when the storm hit. It would also force everyone to stay indoors if the weather turned bad. However, unlike a normal person, the storm would only benefit Naruto. Shinigami agreed that Naruto's decision to wait before seeing the Hokage as Yurei was unusually wise. Going into a potential combat situation with unfamiliar equipment would have been foolish, he reasoned. And Naruto was not going to fool himself. This was a potential combat situation. On the plus side, the young man had improved his skills once more in the last few weeks. Naruto's repertoire of Winjutsu had grown significantly, though he was still unable to perform the Kase no Yaiba, much to his chagrin. This puzzled Naruto because the jutsu was very similar to his own Kasekin. The Kase no Yaiba, on the other hand, remained connected to the user's fingers, increasing and decreasing its length based on the chakra output. This made the Wind Sword jutsu a much better close-range weapon than his Kasekin, but not as good in mid-range or longer-distance combat. Another of his own creations was the jutsu he was most proud of at the time. Fuden. Kazutama Seisha, or Wind Style, Windball Volley, was the name he gave it. Despite the fact that his own title was fairly self-explanatory, Kyuubi claimed that he lacked imagination when it came to naming things. Shinigami stated that he didn't care what he called the damn thing as long as he didn't have to yell its name or make any hand signals to activate it. Unfortunately, Naruto couldn't do either, and the jutsu didn't have nearly as much destructive power as he would have liked. However, it was his. He adored his own creation, the Kazutama Seisha. Furthermore, he already had a few suggestions to improve it. Naruto walked into his used and abused training clearing in the Forest of Death, carrying a pair of large, heavy burlap sacks. He whistled loudly and piercingly, his lips pursed. A series of loud roars broke the silence all around the clearing. 6 of the endangered giant white tigers stalked into the clearing with feline grace. Naruto watched in awe as their muscles rippled beneath their smooth, soft fur. Their eyes gleamed with intelligence as they locked their gaze on Naruto. Naruto met their gaze without flinching, which meant he missed the last beast behind him. The tiger jumped onto his back and pounced, knocking him to the ground. As it lowered its jaws to Naruto's face and rubbed its head against his cheek, an affectionate, rumbling purr came from deep within its barrel-like chest. "Alright, Tsuji, alright." Naruto laughed as he pushed at the tiger that had tried to kill him only a few weeks before, struggling to get its heavy body off his chest. When Naruto returned to the clearing the day after being ambushed by the tiger, he realized he had forgotten to return the big cat to the wild. The evidence was still there, waiting for him, and he wasn't happy about it. Naruto had returned with some meat as a peace offering, fed it to the tiger, and then let him go at Kyuubi's suggestion. Naruto was ambushed again the next day, this time by 2 tigers. The boy was a little more scratched up this time, but it all ended with the male and female pair being tied up together, cheek to cheek. Naruto returned with some meat as a peace offering. When Naruto approached his training site the next day, he made sure to walk towards it with the wind in his face. Naruto was able to sniff out the 2 big cats and ambush them thanks to his enhanced sense of smell, which he thought he was finally getting used to. The Shinigami had suggested that Naruto move his training site after this process was repeated for a couple more days, each day including the pair of tigers being knocked around, tied up, and then fed, though usually with Naruto accumulating a whole new set of cuts to add to his collection. The Death God had forgotten who he was speaking to. Even Hinata would admit that Naruto had stubbornness issues at times. Naruto had not given up. Then one day, the animals just stopped attacking Naruto. Instead, they came for the free food he had prepared for them. Naruto was now a respected member and provider of the Forest of Death's White Tiger community, so word must have spread quickly. He still had fond memories of Tsuji and Shirobi, or Stripes and White Beauty, the first 2 tigers he had met. Shirobi, Tsuji's mate, was in the early stages of pregnancy at the time, and Naruto could smell it. The blonde fancied himself as the one who had introduced the couple to each other. Naruto made his favorite hand sign and produced his usual ridiculous amount of clones after handing out the meat from the sacks to each tiger. He sealed away the 2 blood-soaked sacks within by pulling out a sealing scroll he had created. I still don't understand why you think it's necessary to carry 2 blood-soaked sacks of meat through the freaking forest of death, which you and I both know draw the occupants of this place like a fox to chicken, when you could just unseal it when you got here, Kyuubi said in. Naruto froze before letting out a wail that was tinged with relief, anger, disbelief, and frustration. Ah, Kyuubi. Why did you have to ruin my fun? I thought it would take him ages to figure it out for himself. Shinigami grumbled. Meh, it makes things a little quicker, he says, his voice musing and regretful. Although I will admit that seeing him run from that huntsman spider the size of a horse, screaming incoherently as he did so, was very amusing. I hate spiders, yelled Naruto. The tigers put down their food and looked at him with interest. They returned to their meal, unconcerned, after confirming that their human was just having another one of his freak-out moments, which happened far more frequently than Naruto would like to admit. Sighing, Naruto walked through the tangle of white-furred felines, burying his face in the silky fur Shirobie, the female, and vigorously rubbing it. Therapy with fuzz. Nothing beat it for getting rid of a bad day, especially when the animal began a deep, rumbling purr that vibrated throughout your body, as Shirobie was doing now. He lay there for a moment longer, buried in soft fur, before forcing himself to stand and leave the clearing, pausing to give Suji one last scratch before doing so. Henge, Naruto said quietly after climbing to the branches of one of the trees around him, their leaves concealing him. The jutsu immediately took effect, and he was transformed back into a falcon. Naruto quickly realized that turning into a plump, edible bird in the presence of a swarm of hungry cats was a bad idea, hence the necessary climb. The falcon's feathers ruffled on their own. Poor memories. Crouching, Naruto jumped off the branch and began to soar, spreading his wings. For the time being, Naruto simply flew, allowing the joy of flight to overcome him. He'd had more trouble in near-death experiences with this shape than any other, except his original. Learning to fly was not easy, but the benefits you received once you did? Those rewards were absolutely magnificent. It was an experience unlike any other, cutting through the air, soaring above the clouds, floating in the firmament with the wind rushing over you. When Naruto flew, he was able to rise above the cares of the world and temporarily leave the burdens of what he had set out to do on the ground. It was an addictive sensation. Will you hurry up, this is boring? I agree, as much as I hate to say it. The two immortals could sense their host's unexpected mischievous intent. Boring? Give me boring. Naruto abruptly folded his wings and plummeted towards the forest floor, which was now far below him, reaching speeds of up to 80 miles per hour. Naruto jumped into a gap in the forest canopy, his wings spread out at his sides, laughing wildly. As Naruto sped through the trees below the canopy, branches reached out with grasping fingers. His falcon eyes were constantly moving, flickering from one place to the next as he reacted instantly and instinctively to every situation. He combined the memory and experience of thousands of hours of flight time with the muscle memory he had developed as a falcon. His wings opened and closed, flapping furiously when he was able to maintain his insane speed. As he half-opened one wing to make a hairpin turn, Naruto could feel the strain of wind resistance. As he folded his feathery limbs tight against his body, shooting like a kunai between a tiny gap between the branches, the wind began to rush over him with increasing swiftness. He whooped loudly, emitting a piercing whistle as he turned his body, banking quickly to avoid the mighty tree trunks, every move sudden yet deliberate, aware, yet unconcerned, that a single slip could mean death. Every movement had an effect, whether it was a slight flex of a tail feather, curling a pinion, or even turning the head. Naruto dipped and climbed, completing corkscrews and loops as they presented themselves. He even scraped a tree with his talon on occasion to make a particularly sharp turn. He could finally see light at the end of his ultimate roller coaster ride after perhaps 30 seconds of glorious adrenaline rush. But there was one minor issue. A spider web was in his path. Panicky, Naruto sent a large amount of wind chakra to cover his wings, instinctively sharpening it as he braced himself for impact. The impact never came as the chakra in front of him sighed through the webbing and Naruto was suddenly out of the forest and in the open air. Tseeeeeeerrrrr. He exclaimed loudly as the wind rushed through his feathers, announcing his victory to the world. He's getting a lot better with that form, Kyuubi observed. Shinigami laughed. After all of his recent practice, he should be. Whenever his clones get bored, they decide to fool around in that form just for fun. As Naruto flew through the sky, he reflected on his friend's achievements. To begin with, Naruto had been trying to get the 9 of them to hang out together more often since the last time they had gone to Ichiraku's. Hinata still dominated ramen competitions, much to Choji's chagrin. She's not even pleasingly plump. Anko would occasionally join them, which had worked wonders for both Ino and Sakura. The fact that they now had a very capable Kunoichi as a role model seemed to improve their attitude significantly. Unfortunately, they still indulged in fangirlism on occasion. They had quickly learned, however, that acting like that around Anko was a bad idea. Flashback. Why paint, Dobi? Water is fine, but why did it have to be a bucket of paint? A very blue Uchiha asked Naruto, who was busy slurping ramen and completely oblivious to Sasuke and his emo ways. Naruto! Exclaimed Sasuke. Huh? He inquired astutely. Sasuke sighed and motioned his presence. Naruto-kun, Hinata introduced himself. Sasuke wanted to know why you used paint on him, Hinata said, frowning. Normally, your pranks are easier on friends, and you save the harder stuff for Mizuki-sensei. Hinata's words were tinged with disapproval. Naruto was quick to respond. Don't be upset, Hinata-chan. I wasn't going to paint Sasuke Teme. Whipped. Coughed Shinigami. Then why did you paint Sasuke? Sakura inquired. Naruto's lips curved into an evil grin. I found a nice pool of water with a lot of leeches in it, and they all went into the bucket of water. That would explain why Mizuki-sensei was so pale today, Shino observed thoughtfully, his voice remaining dry. Naruto laughed evilly. He's getting really good at that, Kyuubi exclaimed, surprised. Perhaps we're a bad influence on him? Shinigami wondered. Naruto pushed his tenant's guffawing sounds to the back of his mind, locked the door, and listened to his friends. You covered Mizuki-sensei in leeches? Ino exclaimed in horror. Naruto chuckled again, unable to stop himself. Which means, Kiba explained between ramen bites. That Sasuke is now the one who appears to be suffering from severe hypothermia. Everyone looked at the dog boy, who ate a few more bites of ramen before noticing the silence and the fact that he was the center of attention. What? He inquired. I believe, Kiba, that this company is vaguely surprised that you would know not just the expression hypothermia, but that this particular medical condition includes the reasonably unsettling symptom of turning its sufferer's outer membrane into the most common of the primaries in color. Kiba speculated on what Shino had just said. Do you find it difficult to believe that I understand hypothermia and that it causes people to turn blue? Shikamaru lazily waved his hand. It's a pain, but that's the gist of it. Kiba shook his head. My sister is a veterinarian, and there was this one day, a couple of weeks ago now, when she was treating an Inuzuka hound named Shiki. I mean, Shiki? What kind of showy name is that? Shinigami murmured, indeed. Naruto smirked. Wait, Shiki? No ears, a scar on its muzzle, a yellow ruff, and a scumbag? Kiba laughed and nodded. Yeah, he's not the nicest of dogs, but anyway, his owner awoke one day to find out that someone had drugged him and shaved his entire body, except for his, equip. We don't need to hear anymore, Kiba, exclaimed Ino, clapping her hands over her ears. Anko chuckled, looking out at Naruto, who had nodded satisfactorily to Kiba's story. Anyway, let me tell you, after you walk downstairs in the early morning to see a bright blue, shivering mass of naked dog, you're going to remember what the hell hypothermia is, right Naruto? Kiba finished, nudging Naruto, who had been sitting next to him, with an elbow. It wasn't my fault. The jerk bit me anyway, and he deserved it. Anko burst out laughing at the academy students' dumbfounded expressions. She had no idea that spending time with young children could be so enjoyable. Hinata simply sighed. Arlia, on the other hand, was commenting on the poor puppy. Me and my big mouth, muttered Naruto. Wait, that was you? Kiba asked, slightly stunned. I deny everything, Naruto stated unequivocally. How on earth would you manage something like that, Naruto? Sakura wondered. According to my father, Choji interjected, Naruto has previously broken into the Anbu headquarters without anyone knowing, so it's not really that surprising to me. The rest of the rookies were taken aback when they saw Naruto. Naruto just hunched his back. How did you prove it? Anko asked as he sipped his sake. On the back of Ibiki head, sans I drew a chibi face. Shino found himself wearing Anko's sake while the purple-haired woman coughed and gasped for air. Dude. Nice work. Kiba exclaimed as he gave Naruto a high five. But why didn't you shave him all? Despite what Shiki did, he didn't deserve to be blue-balled, the kid said, and Anko as well, but only because she had fallen to the ground. Arlia, on the other hand, groaned, knowing that her husband would have a field day with that remark. Sasuke grunted, implying that, while he found the whole thing amusing, he was still covered in blue paint and didn't want to be. Alright, Teme. I'm sorry. Here, if you want, I've got a shirt underneath this jacket, you can wear that until you change. Sasuke frowned for a moment, then grunted, which meant, I find this to be appropriate for the present time, thank you commoner. Naruto thought he was getting pretty good at interpreting Sasuke's grunts. He just hoped it wasn't a sign that he was becoming depressed. Naruto quickly removed his jacket and attempted to remove his shirt. It chose that moment to get stuck over his head, giving the ramen stand patrons an unobstructed view of his well-developed abs. The reactions of the men and women were very different. Among the guys, Sasuke and Kiba mentally added another 100 sit-ups to their workout routine. Shikamaru couldn't care less about Choji's eating. Shino, despite his refusal to admit it, felt superior. There was a reason why all the Aburame men wore so much clothing. Sakura and Ino tried to convince themselves that Sasuke's were superior. Hinata only had a trickle of blood coming from her left nostril. After finally removing his shirt, Naruto handed it to Sasuke, who nodded and removed his own paint-splattered shirt. He froze halfway through and closed his eyes, realizing for the first time that, while things had improved, he had just removed an item of clothing in front of two of his most ardent fans. He quickly shucked his shirt and grabbed Naruto's, telling himself over and over that if he didn't look at them, he'd be fine. Despite this, he continued to look. Both girls were staring at him with stars, freaking stars, in their eyes, and a line of drool was forming at the corners of their mouths. They opened their lips and let out a battle cry of a loud, fangirlish squeal before charging at Sasuke. That squeal got into Anko's ears, bypassed any and all inhibitors in her brain, and kicked the little rage man inside her in the nads. Anko had wrapped both preteens in a snake coming from inside each sleeve in less than a second and tied them to the ground. Anko slowly rose to her feet. "Look, girls," she said, smiling at them. "I like you, I really do, which is why you won't face my usual fangirl punishments. Instead, I'm going to give you one chance, and, since I am so kind and generous." Anko paused slightly. Being stupid and having a snake breathe in their faces caused both girls to start spouting a bunch of nonsense about how great Anko was and thanking her for being so generous to them, the poor miserable beings that they were. Naruto mused that they only admitted it because Anko's level of killing intent was quite impressive at this point. "So, today I'm going to teach you a lesson," Anko said, waving her hand to quiet her captives. "This is something that, if used correctly, will almost certainly save your life in the field one day." Everyone looked at Anko with interest. Anko slowly released the girls from her babies, making 3 hand signs before slapping her hand against the ground and disappearing into the smoke. Her voice came from within, despite the fact that she appeared to be bodiless. Lesson 32 has begun. Holy shit, don't get eaten by the giant summon. End of flashback. Despite this, Sakura, in particular, was beginning to show signs of the woman she would become one day. Naturally, Naruto claimed sole responsibility for Sakura's transformation. Although it had taken some time to penetrate the Tami's thick skull, Naruto had finally been able to teach the Emo Uchiha that running was not only an effective training regimen, but that it could sometimes be the better option. Naruto had to ignore Kyuubi and Shinigami's laughter at the blonde's hypocrisy. It had been a surprisingly simple task. Flashback. "There's no way this could ever be that useful," Sasuke grumbled. "I understand tree walking, but running? Everyone can do that, Dobi." Naruto exhaled a sigh. "Okay, Teme, why don't you come train with me and Hinata-chan tomorrow morning?" Sasuke had reluctantly agreed. "Alright, Sasuke," Naruto said. "Play a game with me. The first person to land a solid hit wins." "Who wins?" Sasuke inquired. Naruto paused for a moment, thinking. "Ramen," he exclaimed, his face clearing as he reached for the old standby. Sasuke groaned. "But what if I win?" he speculated. Naruto smirked, almost cockily. "Do whatever you want, but you won't touch me," Sasuke snarled angrily. Hinata presided as the proctor and signaled for them to begin. Naruto turned and ran as Sasuke charged forward. When Sasuke came to a halt, perplexed, he found himself pushed to the back as Naruto ran a ring around him, taking advantage of his immobility. "Too slow," exclaimed Naruto cheerfully. The chase began, once, twice, 3 times around Konoha, not as a jog or light run, but as a full-throttle sprint. After a few more laps, they returned to the field, and Naruto, breathing lightly, cocked his fists at Sasuke. "Ready?" Sasuke was gasping for air by this point. "I can hardly stand," he exclaimed. "Your opponent will not wait for you to be ready." Naruto snarled, kicking out in front of him. Sasuke desperately blocked. "When you are weak, the enemy will strike." A right cross was blocked. "When you're distracted." A left hook was dodged as Sasuke desperately jumped back. "They strike when you can't." A powerful punch landed in Sasuke's face. He was thrown to the ground, gasping for air. Naruto knelt beside Sasuke's almost unconscious body. Shinobi run to their missions. If you don't practice running, you won't have the speed or endurance to fight properly at the end of the long haul. Right now, all we really do is practice kunai, shuriken, and taijutsu. We don't have a sensei to teach us nin or genjutsu, and most of us are just bumbling along in taijutsu anyway. Kunai. He was back the next day, a fire in his eyes, ready to run again. End of flashback. Shinigami had instilled in him that speed was one of the most important factors in many ninja missions, along with endurance. Many times, ninja failed to deliver critical information to their superiors because they spent too much time practicing their ninjutsu and not enough time running. Aside from that, the increased speed and endurance gave a shinobi a significant advantage in battle. Sakura's running training had also made it physically impossible for her to get close to the object of her affections at times. As a result, Naruto was able to lend her a hand after mentioning that he had taught Sasuke a thing or two. Sakura had scoffed, but this had subsided after Naruto demonstrated the tree-walking technique to her. Sakura got it the first time, but the amount of time she could spend clinging to a tree was pitying. She could barely last 10 minutes right now. Hinata-chan could do it for over an hour. Naruto had suggested that Sakura join them for their morning runs, which she usually did, but she hadn't been able to complete the entire routine, let alone the sparring matches that they had afterwards. But she was getting better. Hinata had almost completely stopped stuttering by this point. Although, Naruto reflected, she still has those fainting spells now and then, and I have no idea why. Shinigami and Kyuubi exchanged thoughtful glances before sighed and nodded. They knew what, or more precisely, who, was the source of the problem. Hinata's academic performance had been steadily improving. By this point, she was vying with Sasuke for the title of Rookie of the Year, though Sakura still beat her and pretty much everyone else in terms of academics. But Naruto knew that if Hinata kept going the way she was, she'd end up on Team 7. Although this worried Shinigami because it would completely disrupt the timeline, Naruto was beginning to like the idea of Hinata joining Team 7 with him and Sasuke. When it came to Hinata and Sasuke, Naruto had gone to meet them. When Sasuke finally mastered the tree walking exercise, he continued working on it at Naruto's suggestion in order to replenish his chakra reserves. To the Uchiha's credit, it had taken him a full day less than the original timeline to perfect the tree walking exercise, but Naruto personally attributed all credit to Hinata and her Byakugan. With this, along with the running and sparring, Sasuke was beginning to wonder aloud whether he should add Naruto to his list of people who deserve to die. It had grown quite large by this point. He'd decide after determining whether or not his training was effective. After removing the feathers and releasing the henge in a place where no one could see him, Naruto only had a short distance to walk before meeting his two friends at the pier where Sasuke had first practiced his fireball jutsu. "You're late," Sasuke reflected. "Sorry, there was an elderly lady carrying groceries who needed assistance getting them home." "Did you help her, Naruto-kun?" Hinata inquired. Naruto rubbed the back of his neck, embarrassed. "Actually, no. This guy named Kakashi offered to help, and I almost fainted from shock." They both just stared at him. Naruto's sweat evaporated. They'd understand. They would understand one day. Anyway. Weren't we supposed to see something? Kaiten. Gokyaku no Jutsu. Smirked Sasuke as he went through his hand seals. A massive fireball, not quite twice the size but far hotter than any fireball Sasuke had ever created, erupted from his mouth. Naruto whistled gratefully. "Not bad, Teme." I told you the training would produce results. Sasuke looked at him with arrogance, a smirk on his face. Soon, he promised. I'll soon have the ability to OWW. Naruto took up a large stick. He got the idea from Fukasaku and his stick, which he used to beat the nature chakra out of people. As a result, he now possessed a stick capable of beating the emo out of people, which he had discovered to be quite effective, much to Sasuke's chagrin. Hinata, on the other hand, remained silent. Seeing the success of others and comparing herself to Naruto and Sasuke only made her feel more inferior. I'm sorry, Sasuke, Naruto said cheerfully, not looking sorry. You were getting all emo on us again. Dobi, HNN. Naruto smirked. Be careful, Teme, or I'll have Hinata spar with you again. Sasuke shivered uncontrollably, recalling his last fight with the Hyuga heiress. Flashback. When Naruto first suggested that Sasuke and Hinata spar using only taijutsu, Sasuke's immediate reaction was to act arrogantly and with a superior air. He had obviously assumed that Hinata would pose little of a challenge to him. Naruto assumed this was understandable. After all, he had little experience with the fairer sex, fangirls don't count, and Hinata was a girl. Oh, you've noticed, haven't you? Naruto ignored his second tenant with practiced ease, briefly wondering why he had agreed to allow Shinigami to stay in his head in the first place. In any case, unlike Sasuke, Hinata lacked the fighter's gaze. Those gorgeous lavender eyes. Naruto's cheeks began to flush slightly. Not even Kayab's. Alright, I'll act as proctor for the match. Taijutsu only, which means Sasuke, if I see any fireballs, I'll throw you into the middle of a horde of fangirls wearing only your boxers and covered in honey, MK? Naruto said cheerfully, his eyes smiling at the horrified Uchiha. Hajime. Sasuke rushed in close to Hinata, thinking that if he got close to her, her shy demeanor would overwhelm her and he'd be able to end this farce quickly. His first move was a showy, but powerful, sweeping kick to the face. Hinata, much to his surprise, did not move from that spot, instead slipping into the splits and lightly tapping several points on his leg with lightning-fast hands. Wow, that girl is adaptable. Naruto nodded before pausing and grumbling internally at Shinigami. Despite his surprise, Sasuke was able to place his hands on the ground and bring his other leg across, striking his target and knocking Hinata to the ground. Naruto unconsciously growled. Down, kid. Smirking, Sasuke rose to his feet, only to have his eyes widen in surprise as the leg Hinata had touched almost gave way. While Hinata was still dazed, Sasuke went on the attack, shrugging it off. So he reasoned. In reality, Hinata was just playing possum and hurled several blows at Sasuke, who immediately countered with his family's intercepting fist. Sasuke screamed in agony as his blows were rendered ineffective, as well as the agonizing sensation of foreign chakra moving into his body. Kyuubi murmured to Naruto, the girl has skilled hands too. The brunette flushed. With his fists no longer able to close, Sasuke attempted a backhand across the face, which was easily blocked, leaving Hinata open to a knee to the stomach from Sasuke's good leg. Finally realizing that he needed to stay away from her hands at all costs, Sasuke and Hinata danced back and forth, each receiving blows but with more pain from Sasuke as even a slight graze from Hinata caused damage. This dodging style he was attempting didn't suit him, and Hinata was graceful enough that even if he tried to deflect her strikes, he would still take some damage. The fight would have been much more intense if Sasuke had not allowed Hinata to virtually disable one of his legs in the first few seconds of the sparring due to his own arrogance. Finally, Hinata delivered a sweeping kick to Sasuke's face that was nearly identical to the one he had used to start the fight. Smirking, Sasuke held up his arms in a crossguard to block the kick, only to give a loud grunt of pain as the kick plowed through his guard, smashed into his face, and thudded him to the ground. She's also got a great ass. Naruto blinked in response to this statement. Unlike the others, it seemed unrelated to the fight or his. Well, maybe it was related to his thoughts, but... What exactly do you mean? He inquired. Look, most people kick from the knees. Hinata's kick had a wider range of motion, increased leverage, and more power because her kick originated from her hips rather than the knees. Ergo, nice ass, he concluded. Arlia had previously explained and used the technique on him. You are within my divination range, Hinata said quietly. 8 trigrams and 32 palms. Naruto was taken aback by Hinata's ability to perform this move. However, he shouldn't have been surprised. After all, Hinata had had to almost completely teach herself the gentle fist after her father had passed her off to Kurenai as a waste of space. This time, she had expert teachers who didn't mock her at every attempt, and Arlia, who helped build her confidence to unprecedented heights, though he didn't realize it. Sasuke attempted and failed to rise to his feet. His entire body appeared to be one huge ball of pain. He was unable to move. The gentle fist works by targeting specific P points in the body and pulsing chakra into those points to paralyze or destroy the body. It targeted your legs in particular. They should be numb by now. You can no longer move. I've won. Hinata asked, surprised. Hey, Kit, I'd like to bet you'd like to make it so her legs are. Naruto roared in his mind, trying to stop the steady flow of blood coming from his nose. End of flashback. Hinata perked up a little as she remembered her previous success in fighting the last Uchiha. Sasuke was bigger, stronger, and faster than she was. As a result of all of this, he greatly underestimated her. Sasuke now had an irrational, if reasonable, fear of the slight girl after the regular plethora of Juken strikes she had dealt him. Alright, Naruto said, clapping his hands together and enthusiastically rubbing them. The following item on the agenda is yet another chakra control exercise. Sasuke sighed. The last time Naruto made him do a chakra control exercise, he ended up spending a night in jail after running from an Anbu patrol while wearing a Naruto henge and trying to keep a pair of leaves stuck to this body for 10 minutes. It had been surprisingly easy, almost disturbingly easy, to get them to chase him. The next thing we'll do is go water walking, Naruto said with a slightly sadistic grin. And Teme, I know the ideal location. Naruto returned to his parents' house after leaving a cursing and swearing Sasuke at the hot springs, Hinata having already left. This time, however, he double-checked and triple-checked that he was not being followed. He didn't even bother giving the front door any blood when he got there. He didn't have to because the seal glowed orange the moment he touched the handle. 5 minutes later, I noticed him in his parents' room, preparing for his visit to the Hokage. He had made one more modification to his uniform, placing the Namikaze clan emblem on his left shoulder. As he went over his kit, he bit his lip and stuck the tip of his tongue out of the corner of his mouth. Kunai? Check. Shuriken? Check. Wire? Check. His mother's sword? Check. But something was still missing. Naruto smiled as he opened his father's top drawer and took out the tri-pronged kunai that lay within. I'm ready now, he said quietly. Best wishes, kid, Shinigami said. Let's go, Naruto said quietly, drawing his mask up and over his face. Sarutobi considered the mountain of paperwork in front of him, wondering if burning it all was a viable option. He sighed long and painfully, probably not. Knowing his luck, it would almost certainly result in a diplomatic incident. Sarutobi grumbled as he prepared for a long night's work. A sound came from what appeared to be an empty room. As he stood in a loose stance, kunai at the ready, Sarutobi's grumpy expression transformed into that of a hardened veteran. "Show yourself," he exclaimed as he searched the room. "As sharp as ever, Hiruzen," a voice replied. "Although a little slower than you once were," it reflected. Sarutobi swept his eyes around the room feverishly, but he remained completely calm, focusing on every single detail. The empty easy chair, the bookcase, the rug, and the pot plants. The third took another look around the room. The room was no longer empty this time. A man dressed in black, with both hands folded behind his head, sat in the chair with ease, his booted feet propped up on the Hokage's desk in front of him. His entire demeanor was unthreatening and simply exuded confidence. "Who are you?" Sarutobi inquired, his voice as tough as steel but tinged with the slightest hint of curiosity. After all, it wasn't every day that someone broke into the Hokage's office with such unconcern. Except for Naruto. "No one of importance," the figure mumbled as he lifted a heel and thumped it on a spot on the desk that appeared to be identical to the rest of it. Except that it was a very specific point on the desk. When a button was pressed, a secret compartment at the back of the desk popped open. Hiruzen's eyes widened dramatically. Only the Hokage and his closest allies were aware of the compartment. This person, whoever he was certainly not insignificant. The figure made a cross-shaped seal, causing a shadow clone to appear, his movements still lazy, slow, and unthreatening. Hiruzen's pupils constricted and he tensed. The Bunshin had appeared behind the desk, with no trace of smoke to indicate its presence. This indicated that this person had a high level of proficiency with this jutsu, which was concerning because even he was hesitant to use such a chakra-draining technique. The Bunshin simply took a sake bottle and a pair of saucers from the compartment, raising an eyebrow at the gold edition of Icha that was placed next to the bottle of alcohol. Naruto grinned sarcastically as it did so. Tsunade had shown him this after Jiraiya died. It was the first and only time he had ever seen that woman cry. "Come, Lord Hokage," the man said, smiling. "Come have a drink with me." The third Hokage sat warily behind the desk, ready to defend himself if necessary, his hand drifting to rest on a very different button than the one that this stranger had just pressed, one that would summon his shinobi to his office in an instant. But he'd leave it alone for the time being. He wasn't the Hokage for nothing, and this man wasn't a threat just yet. The clone served as a waiter, pouring 2 drinks into the saucers and placing them in front of them before dissipating. Hiruzen was disturbed to see someone using that technique for such mundane purposes. "A toast!" exclaimed the man, raising his saucer to the sky. "What to?" Sarutobi asked, clearly forming the 4 required hand signs for a diagnostic jutsu in front of the man to check for poison. There weren't any. The man simply laughed at his paranoia. What did he expect, to be honest? "To the Namikaze clan," Hiruzen's mysterious visitor said, nodding firmly. In response, the professor nodded slowly. I'll drink to that." They tapped their saucers together and drank their drinks all at once, slamming the empty saucers onto the desk's bare wood. Sarutobi poured them both another drink in the hopes of stalling time and learning more about this person. Hiruzen sighed and said, "The Namikaze. A great and honorable clan," he said, sipping from his sake saucer. "My clan," the man in front of him said quietly. Sake sprayed across the room from the shocked Hokage's mouth as he spat it out. "Who are you?" he inquired once more. The Namikaze shook his head. "If you have to call me something, I suppose you could call me by the same name that the Hyuga now call me, Yurei." Sarutobi smirked. Although he was aware of a recent large incident within the Hyuga clan, which had been reported to him by both Anko and Kurenai, he had not been able to determine the cause. After all, it would have taken a pretty big reason for the entire Hyuga clan to apologize to their heiress for their less than cordial behavior. Sarutobi had an inkling that the reason was right in front of him. "What did you do to the Hyuga clan?" he inquired quietly. He shook his head. "I inspired them to treat those they consider beneath them with kindness, or at the very least without visible contempt." Sarutobi laughed. "Wow, that sounds like a lot of motivation." Yurei laughed. "You have no idea, but they deserved it. As a Namikaze, I couldn't let them keep doing what they were doing." Hiruzen cocked his head in the direction of Yurei. "I thought the Namikaze clan had died out after Minato's death." Yurei laughed out loud. "Minato was always good at keeping secrets, wasn't he?" Sarutobi nodded, then stopped himself as Yurei continued. "His secrets, his wedding, his wife, me, his son." Hiruzen Sarutobi's eyes hardened. "I'm sure I have no idea what you're talking about, and if you're wise, you'll follow my lead." Yurei simply waved at him. "I'm not going to harm Naruto or tell any spies that he's Minato and Kushina's child. He's family." The third was staring at him. "Oh, then tell me why you were kept a secret." Yurei cast a glance into the distance. "Despite the fact that I was kept hidden from the village, Minato loved me, he believed in me, and when he hit rock bottom, when there was nothing else he could do, I was the one he used." "I believe you have someone who works in the shadows?" Sarutobi frowned. "Yes, he did, and if this man was anything like Danzo, he'd be a dangerous foe." "What have you been doing for the last few years?" he inquired. Yurei shrugged, but Naruto was sweating inside his mindscape. So far, he had only told the Hokage the truth, albeit with a slight twist. Despite his success in duping Hiashi, he couldn't do anything resembling Sage Mode or he'd be attacked right away. Traveling, fighting, gathering information, and searching for a specific Uchiha. Sarutobi's eyes blinked. "Have you been looking for Itachi?" Yurei raised his head. "Who then?" "Only Itachi and Sasuke remain, and Sasuke has never left Konoha." "You're mistaken," Yurei said quietly. "A third Uchiha is still alive. He was the one who ripped Kyuubi from Kushina. He was the one who set the Great Fox against the village. He is the reason Naruto now carries his burden." In his suddenly iron grip, the armrests of the chair Hiruzen was sitting on snapped like a twig. He steeled himself and pressed the panic button. He needed to talk to this person for a long time. He clenched his fists in front of him and asked a question that had bothered him for years. Would this man have removed Kushina from the room where she was about to give birth? Yurei gave a nod. Sarutobi's knuckles became whiter. "Then he murdered my wife," he exhaled. "I apologize." The professor thumped his clenched fist onto his desk, the force of which knocked his papers all over the place. The third's cursing was cut off by the Namikaze's voice. "Do all of the cage have to do this much paperwork?" he wondered. Hiruzen simply sighed. Yurei grinned. "I remember a certain blonde-haired Hokage who used to despise paperwork with a vengeance," chuckled Hiruzen, recalling his successor and, sadly, predecessor. He froze, however, when Yurei continued. I never understood why, though, because there is a relatively simple way around it. You know the secret to defeating the menace of paperwork? Hiruzen Sarutobi exclaimed, relieved that the man had provided him with a distraction from his grief. The Namikaze slowly nodded, a small smile hidden behind his mask. Hiruzen Sarutobi, the third Hokage, known as the Professor by both friends and foes, veteran of 3 world wars, feared as the Kami no Shinobi, student of the Nidaime, and sensei of the 3 legendary Sannin, knelt in front of the disguised Naruto and begged. Master, please teach me your secret. Naruto stared incredulously at the third, a man he had admired for most of his life, who was groveling on the ground in front of him. He smirked a little. If he could only tell everyone that the Hokage was groveling at Naruto's feet. Naruto lorded it over Hiruzen with his hand. Well, it's actually quite simple. All you have to do is... Kit. Naruto was quick to respond to Kyuubi's warning. He'd been so taken aback by the old man's actions that he hadn't noticed the presence behind him. Naruto had flipped over the back of the chair in an instant, a low-powered Rasengan glowing in his palm as he thrust it towards the one who had sneaked up behind him. But it was all for naught, as a second man's butt of a kunai to the back of his neck sent him deep into the blackness of unconsciousness. Guy chuckled nervously, looking down at the palm pressed against his chest. A palm that had only moments before held one of the most powerful close-range techniques known to the shinobi world. Thank you, my eternal rival. I must admit, I'm not built for all this sneaking around, and that one was much closer than I'd like to admit. You've spent too much time in direct combat, Guy. You need to work on your assassination skills, Wolf said. Kakashi shook his head, his Sharingan eye revealing itself as he stared at the man he had just knocked unconscious. It's not just that, Tenzo, Kakashi explained to Wolf, who sighed at Kakashi's persistent use of his name. Guy was completely focused on moving quietly, which is why his opponent got so close. I admit, he's gotten rusty, but we were all surprised when the man acted. Wolf gave a nod. Fortunately, you'd already revealed your Sharingan, he said. Or I'd have been in a very unyouthful situation, Guy grumbled. Kakashi shook his head once more. That Rasengan was designed to disable rather than kill. But if the Hokage hadn't distracted him with his little act. He came to a halt when Hawk and Cat entered the room, both of whom blinked at the unknown man who appeared to be napping on the carpet. The third sprang into action. Hawk, take this man to interrogation room 3 and summon Inoichi. I'm going to need to look inside this man's head. Cat?
Summon Hiashi to the same room.
If he protests, tell him that we have a man named Yurei in custody. The 2 Anbu saluted and left the office, Hawk dragging Yurei with them. Hiruzen quietly closed his office doors and activated 2 sets of seals. One of the seals was for preventing Sunshin from entering and exiting his office, while the other was a simple sound barrier that would keep their conversation private. Normally, Hiruzen said to the 3 men in the room, I'd congratulate you for arriving so quickly after I pressed the panic button, he said, smiling grandfatherly at them. It was nothing, Hokage-sama, exclaimed Guy. We managed with the full power of, he came to a halt as the Hokage raised his hand, signaling him to stop. Hiruzen continued, still smiling kindly. But do you realize, bastards, that he was about to reveal the secret to avoiding paperwork? When they saw the fiery gleam in the old man's eyes, the 3 elite Jonin broke out in cold sweat.
Meanwhile, Hiashi sat in his study, playing Go Fish with his 2 daughters.
While doing so, he attempted to persuade both of them to speak with him. Hanabi had started right away, but Hinata. She hadn't said anything at first. Deep down, she still believes that whatever you're doing for her now is a ruse, and I don't blame her. Hiashi made a slight grimace. He'd started these nightly meetings with his daughters 3 weeks before, the day after Uzumaki rather. Harsh sans words. His words were harsh, but they were also entirely accurate. They were still going through his head, hammering each and every point in over and over. Hanabi was the only one who spoke the first night. Hiashi had looked at her with pride before turning his gaze to his daughter, who was crouched in on herself, barely able to make eye contact.
This was the first time the three of them had been alone in a room together in.
He couldn't remember how long. Hiashi snorted softly. Wasn't this supposed to be his daughter? The Hyuga clan's heir? Do you know how much she wishes she wasn't a member of her clan because of you? Hiashi had jumped when Uzumaki's words first entered his mind. When he returned to the Hyuga clan house, he dismissed them out of hand as the security of his castle washed away his negative thoughts. He had first gathered his daughters because a nagging doubt had refused to leave his mind. He had imagined that he would prove Jinchuriki wrong.
In that endeavor, he had failed.
Despite listening to Hanabi's words and responding to her, he kept Hinata in the corner of his eye the entire time, even as she served them tea. Hiashi had left his untouched for the majority of the evening, until he noticed Hanabi doing the same, and Hinata had shrunk even deeper within the collar of her jacket. Sighing, he had taken a sip, only to have his eyes widen in surprise as the taste seemed to start a concert within his mouth. It's good, he muttered, prompting Hanabi to try some for herself. Looking up again, he was taken aback by the change in expression caused by just one word. Hinata was smiling as if she were a completely different person. Do you realize how much she longs to hear just a kind word from you?
Every action Hiashi took seemed to reinforce the points Naruto had made to him.
Hinata had brought in a pack of cards to pass the time after the third night of them just sitting there doing nothing.
She'd started to get into the game that night, and there was this one strand of her that had fallen out of place.
It had irritated Hiashi to no end, so after a little more than a quarter hour, Hiashi suddenly moved his hand to brush it over her ear. Hinata shivered.
Her father had moved his hand toward her face, causing her to flinch.
True, it had been small, but it had always been there. Hinata apologized profusely as an involuntary frown crossed his features. Hiashi had been perplexed by her actions. Why would she be so agitated by the suggestion of a touch and then make such a big deal out of it? Because she was afraid you'd see it as another sign of weakness and beat her. The Lord's mind was filled with Naruto's voice. Oh.
Despite this, Hinata was still extremely shy around her family. But there were times when Hiashi caught a glimpse of her true personality, and it made him
curious. Hiashi began to observe his daughter, following her around in his spare time with nearly the same zeal as his target had once observed a blonde boy. To his ever-increasing horror, he discovered that most of what Naruto had told him was true. After 5 days of waiting, one of the branch members' 4-year-old daughter came to Hinata crying and with a skinned knee. Hiashi had become irritated by this. A Hyuga should be more powerful than this. Imagine his surprise when Hinata took the girl to her own room right away. She fussed over the girl like a mother hen once she arrived, comforting the crying girl. She sat her on the bed and got a cream, which she rubbed into the graze while making soothing sounds with her voice as the girl winced at the stinging sensation. When Hinata finished, Hiashi's brows rose as new skin replaced the graze. How had her creams improved so much? It's for her personal use after her training sessions with her family, so no one else knows how frequently she is beaten at home.
Hiashi flushed.
Practice. That's how it worked.
He was able to understand the gist of the two girls' conversation by focusing his Byakugan on their lips.
Hiashi had always specialized in lip reading, though he was never as good as his big brother at reading body language. The next time you hurt yourself, Higashi, go to your mother, Hinata advised. But Hinata-sama. Hinata grinned and knelt to Higashi's level.
So.
The child drew Hinata in close and whispered to her behind a covered hand. Is he scary? Hinata inquired. Higashi gave a nod. Hinata gave her a friendly smile. Yes, fathers can be frightening at times, but you love him, don't you? Higashi gave a nod. And he loves you, so don't be afraid of him, Hinata added. Higashi grinned and nodded enthusiastically before frowning. Hinata-sama, do you love your father? She inquired, her voice childish. Hinata simply smiled and extended her hand to the girl. I love and respect my father above all else. Hiashi was sickened when he heard the voice of another man. Her father, whom she loved and respected above all others, constantly abused her, sent her into deep depressions, and almost drove her to suicide.
Higashi inquired, does Hiashi-sama love you?
Hinata's smile sagged. Alright, let's get you back to your Kasan, she said. Hiashi felt like he'd been kicked in the stomach. She didn't respond to the question.
Why didn't she respond?
She had to know he loved her. A voice rang out in his head once more, this time not a memory but his conscience, which sounded suspiciously like Uzumaki-san.
Dumbass, when was the last time you told her you loved her?
Hiashi had pushed that voice to the back of his mind with great effort. He was just being ridiculous. Hinata was probably too shy to tell her he loved her. Didn't he still show it? He was, after all, her father. Naruto's voice spoke to him once more. It's funny, I'm not sure I trust you to be her father. The Hyuga Lord had cried himself to sleep that night, for the first time since his brother's death, after carefully sealing his room to prevent both entry and the Byakugan eyes. All of this had led him here, sitting in his normally private study with his two children, playing a simple game of Go Fish and, strangely, feeling almost grateful to Yurei for the opportunity. Do you have any sevens?
Hinata inquired innocently.
Nei-chan, no Byakugan. Hanabi scolded her older sister, a slight scowl on her face. Hiashi chuckled at the pout that adorned Hinata's features. The door was pounded 3 times. Hiashi drilled his emotionless mask into his face. He had left specific instructions not to be interrupted. He came face to face with Horinsa after yanking the door open. Yes? He inquired coldly. Horinsa rubbed his hands as he spoke to his clan head, clearing his throat first.
Please accept my apologies, Hiashi-san.
Sama.
Hiashi yelled angrily.
Horinsa paused briefly before continuing, a tinge of distaste in his voice, clearing his throat once more. Please accept my apologies, Hiashi-sama, but you have a visitor. The Anbu cat bowed before the clan chief. Please excuse me, Hyuga-sama, but the Hokage has requested that you appear in Interrogation Room 3. Hiashi peered through the open doors into the clan's open grounds, noting the dark sky above and the wind, which had caused everyone to board up their windows by this point.
He could hear its mighty howling from where he was.
Now? He inquired, amused. Cat bowed again at the waist. He says I'm supposed to tell you that we have a man named Yurei in custody. Both Hyuga froze. I'm on my way, Hiashi announced. He spoke to his daughters as he closed the door. Please excuse me. I will return as soon as possible. Hinata looked at him, concerned. With the weather as it was, that would not be the best option.
Be careful, Chu-san, Hiashi said, his heart pounding as he heard his daughter's concern in her voice.
He found it endearing while also being annoyed that he found it endearing. Hinata took a bold step forward and wrapped her arms around her father's waist. Hiashi looked down into his daughter's face, taking in the details of her slight blush, closed eyes, and small, curving smile. When was the last time he had been embraced by his daughter? Hiashi placed his hand on Hinata's head slowly and jerkily.
Hinata tensed, bracing herself for being shoved aside.
She was taken aback when Hiashi simply rubbed her head and stepped away. Yane, Hinata-chan, Hiashi said softly as he approached the door.
Hiashi nodded at Kat as he exited the study.
Alright, let's go. Horinsa was left alone, staring at the door to Hiashi's study, where the object of his rage innocently played, unaware that her protector was imprisoned. Horinsa rubbed his hands gleefully, unconcerned about the moist sensation they provided. This sensation was left over from a disgusting habit. Horinsa was a man who was constantly clearing his throat, as if there was mucus in the back of it. It would have been impolite for Hyuga to spit, and he found the idea of carrying a hanky or tissues around repulsive and annoying, not to mention indecent. Instead, he would bring his hand up to his mouth and deposit his sputum there, then rub his hands together to ensure that it spread and dried. He repeated this as he walked towards the Hyuga Elders' council room. When he entered, he discovered that the clan's sealing master was also present. Good. Yurei is in jail. Prepare to seal Hinata with the cage bird seal. Smiles returned to him.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.